Good afternoon. This is the House Appropriations Committee. It's Tuesday, April 14th, 2026. It's just after 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and we are here to take up the part 2 of the education bill. It's 9:55. It's come out of Ways and Means, and not to outdo House Ed. Their amendment is quite a few pages longer than the original bill. So we will, the plan for the afternoon is we are going to hear from the chair of House Ways and Means with just a quick overview of what they were trying to do. And then I think we'll have Julia go over the fiscal note, and we have attorneys here as needed to answer those questions. We also have the treasurer's office coming in at 2 or 2:15 because there's stuff related to school construction, which is related to bonding. So they're going to come in. We're going to try to get all of our questions answered from all of these fabulous people in the room. And then we're going to take a break. We'll go off camera for half an hour and people can call their friends, talk to each other, figure out what you want to do, and then we'll come back and vote. And that will be the day. I will let you know, because there is some capital bonding. There's going to be a flyby through corrections and institutions tomorrow. They're just going to take a look at it. But that doesn't affect what we're doing today. We're still on the same path that we're going to be on. So that is the plan. So, Chair Kornheiser, do you want to come up? Give us a brief. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much, sir. Hi, I'm Leigh Kornheiser, representative from Brattleboro, chair of the House Ways and Means Committee. Nice to see you all here again. I don't want to rehash everything I said at the caucus of the whole. So what I will say is the Ways and Means Amendment takes the next step, probably the third year in a 7-year process to transform our education system to create more opportunities for kids and much more stable and very possibly much lower property tax bills for Vermonters. And so part of our amendment is deep in property tax law, really taking the next steps from work that we had the tax department do over the summer. We had a great collaboration with them. The language in those sections pretty closely mirrors everything that they were looking for next steps. That feels very strong. And then the other aspects are the finance side and the spending side, related to adjustments we needed to make in the timeline, ways we needed to shift things slightly to accommodate the CISAs. And then next steps for a lot of pieces that wrap around the foundation formula that were never anticipated to be part of the foundation formula. So that includes next step for studying transportation aid, next steps for studying special education aid, next steps for studying, for setting rules for reserves in a district, which are used very, very differently from community to community, and a few other details like that. Altogether, and one of the things that's challenging about this bill is it really only works when it's all together. So you asked a question on the floor, Representative, about where the cost savings comes from. There are many ways in our education system that long-term cost savings happen, but without the changes in property taxes and without the changes in the foundation formula, those cost savings are not realized by all Vermont taxpayers. They are spread very unevenly throughout the state. And so the tax changes creates the fairness in the tax policy. The CISAs and the foundation formula create both cost savings and the capturing of that cost savings, and spreads that out equitably and fairly across the state so that all kids can have opportunities. One of the things that I imagine will be quite challenging to you all, and it's challenging to everyone, but you, I think, will be acutely aware of it, is very little in here happens next year. And so the fiscal note has a whole lot of very well articulated, we don't know yet, not to bury the lead. And even some of the very tangible savings, the very tangible spending, like some of the spending that will be required for the regional assessment district changes, that is also out quite a few years and is expected to be spread out over 6 years. And even that, we're not sure on how much will be needed because it's sort of a greater less than of two numbers, and we don't know what one of those, what one of those numbers will be. So this work is slow and careful, and we are trying to take into consideration so many externalities. And that is how we need to do this work. But I think it's very uncomfortable for those of us who really want to like compare the apples to the apples and say what will be different next year. And that unfortunately is not quite possible at this time. But I think by the end of next year, very much will be. And I really look forward to having that conversation then, once we have everything in place.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure.
You all took on a lot of pieces,
Mhm.
and we're going to hear more about them from Julia.
Okay.
Well, yes, go ahead.
This is just a very general question. I see signs, that reduce the conversation to get rid of property taxes for schools, and I know that we have these at
I
different.
can't quite hear you. I'm so sorry.
So I see the reduced, the messages that are reduced to 2 or 3 words with respect to the whole transformation. And what's struck me as being very good about this process from the very beginning is that it's not a 2-year fix or a 1-year fix, that you're seeking all of the different facets that may exist just by saying that taxation here may be different than taxation there. Do you find that people that you're working with, whether it's the state, whoever the stakeholders are, which aren't necessarily upfront, the taxpayers who put the signs on their lawns, are understanding why it takes 7 years to change the tax system in order to pay for education? Because people want to reduce it to just change it now. And that's not happening, and it's not going to happen, which I think is the right thing. But what kind of forces do you have to fend off, or that you have to explain to folks when you're talking about this?
So when we're working very closely with the tax department or listers or town assessors or school district business managers, I think everyone understands that we need to be operating at exactly the speed in order to do this well. When our property tax system, whether it's the homestead, non-homestead status, which I think is confusing to almost everyone, or our very complicated system of property tax credits, I don't think the current system is understandable or tangible to most anyone. And so the speed or slowness with which we would need to ease into a new system, I imagine is also hard for people to get their heads around. But when the tax department was in to give some final tweaks to the language last week, really lost around here. Last week, they used this term tax whiplash, which was actually exactly what I've been looking for, that unless we line up the changes in the foundation formula, the implementation of the CISAs, the changes to the property tax credit system, and the changes to the homestead, non-homestead system, all in the same year, we'll see this wild variation year over year for about 4 years. And so we need to take exactly the amount of time that sort of the slowest piece of the puzzle is going to take in order to be able to deliver to Vermonters both consistent educational opportunities, but also consistent and lower tax bills. And so that's a really important piece of how we laid out that timeline. Thank you for asking.
The question, Wayne.
So it's complicated, and this is a huge thing. And bothers me that I like looking at something you already know, systematic process. And I hear a lot of things, but I don't hear a lot of discussion. We're trying to control the costs. We know we're spending too much money compared to other states for education. We need to have better outcomes. We don't have good outcomes. That should be the goal. The goal should be that we give the proper education to our children at the least cost we can to our citizens, right? And following down with that logic down through. And like the school, the construction part of this thing, I'm saying, oh, wait a minute. We must have a bunch of districts where we don't need a school. So we got a few that might, but why should they be the ones holding it up? Why couldn't we move forward with a chunk of it instead of trying to do everything at once? Why can't we parse this apart a little bit and try to get the easy things done or the things that would have the highest cost savings done in part, and then moving forward as we can through time, right?
So while I personally and in my regular professional life, outside of this role, think that educational outcomes are very important and very interesting, I have a lot to say about them. They have nothing to do with my work on Ways and Means in sort of the day-to-day basis, right? We take the policy work to lead to educational outcomes from the Education Committee, and then we craft the tax structure around that. And I think the House Education Committee would say, and I agree with them, that the next step in this bill is really going to take us one step closer to much better educational outcomes for kids. To answer your very specific question, the school construction is set up just like that in a staged way so that we can make, once we have advice from the school construction experts that are, there's an advisory board and a division at AOE. Once we have that, then we can say where are the most strategic building projects needed. Because what we don't want is for districts to be building on their own in order to shape what the future might look like, right? So if one district can pop up a building faster, they might win an arms race in their region for like where the building is, right? And so we want to make sure that strategic enough that we're looking out for the best interests of kids with that spending, rather than whatever district can move faster on that. While making sure that the decisions that have already made before we pass this law are not going to hurt anyone who made those decisions, because that's not fair, because they didn't know about this future when they did that in the past.
A lot of those runaway costs are in special education.
And that's what the CISA should make a really big difference on, 100%. I actually, yes, I really firmly believe that.
I'm skeptical, but the point being is that, I mean, we have a federal law that says something.
Mhm.
Doesn't say one-on-one,
No.
right? But we're headed towards one-on-one in a lot of the schools. There may be kids are being misidentified and put into those categories because maybe they get more money.
Mhm.
Couldn't we address that without having to wait until the end?
So we actually addressed that in Act, and I'm getting a little ahead of my skis here, but we did address that in 173 a few years ago, and the implementation of that is still in process. One of the things that's interesting about special education law in particular is that every IEP is an individual contract with a family. So in order to change service delivery, every single one of those individual contracts needs to be renegotiated with every single family in order to change that. But I think if you look at the testimony that House Education took about the CISA in the state that's in the Southeast Vermont, you would hear some real improved delivery and decreased costs on special education in that area.
I did a little look at the IEPs, and it was suggested that we could get, with a FOIA request, we could get IEPs that were redacted, so we couldn't tell who they were. Randomized sample to see whether or not those IEPs were effective.
I have no idea, I'm sorry.
All right, so we're kind of getting away from our conversation here, the meeting, and I see that Mike Murphy has a question. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. I would like to say something about student outcomes here, and if it's not the time, I can wait till later. But I think we need to put a hold on whether we assess how our kids are doing to the degree that we used to be very high ranked, and maybe we're not now, but I'm going to be hesitant. And I want to read from a press release from the Agency of Education, February 27th, 2026. As part of preparing our system upgrades, the agency identified a coding error embedded in the original 2017 system design. The Agency of Education recognizes that the discovery of a long-time error affecting federal required designations may create confusion about Vermont's statewide accountability system. This goes on to say they caught this, they're trying to fix it, but I think we need to take and pump the brakes on whether we're going to judge what the outcomes are for Vermont students right now.
Thanks, Mike. I don't think we have any comments, so thank you. All right, so if you're able to hang out, that's for as long as you can, that's great, and I think we will,
I think Representative Canfield will enjoy it.
well, he will enjoy it.
If I stay here.
Oh, okay. if you need to raise back, you just go ahead, but I think if you want to stay here, that's great. We may have some questions. So I think I've been discussing order with folks on the side. It looks like Kirby would be the first one to talk from Ledge Council. And then John and Beth St. James can't be here till a little bit later. She's got parts of this. And great, we will just, thank you, Julia. Julia will come in, fill in and get through the fiscal note in pieces if we have to. We have the treasurer's office coming, so it's all an interesting dance this afternoon. All right, welcome, Kirby.
So good afternoon, Kirby Keaton. Just so that you're acquainted with the attorneys who've worked on this, it's, Beth and John and I. The drafting has gone generally, Beth has done education policy related things, which is the underlying bill. And then the parts of education policy in the amendment that come first are Beth's parts. Mine are in the middle. They relate to property classifications and regional assessment districts, so the property valuation related stuff. And then at the end is the education finance related stuff that Don has drafted. So that's kind of going in sequential order with the amendment, except for skipping Beth.
Okay, so well, Beth was here on Friday and we went over all the bill as it came out of House Education. So it would be great to have Beth here, but presumably we've got most of our questions answered as it relates to that. So we really want to focus on the work that's been done by you all in Ways and Means. So what are we going to use? I have draft 4.2.
We can look at draft 4.2, the amendment itself, or we could look at, we have a section by section summary that staff had prepared as of last night.
Is that different from the fiscal note?
Yes. Yep. It's different than the fiscal note.
We don't have that.
We can provide it. So if you'd rather go through it in summary form, we can do that, or I can go through the bill.
Do you want to do the, do you have the section by section you can share the screen while we're getting copies? So this is on House Ways and Means website.
Yeah.
You've got it? Okay. So give it a minute and refresh your pages and some of us would like copies.
Yes, things are happening fast. I think this was finalized around midnight last night, so.
Yeah, well, I got Julia's note, late, it was last night too, so I know you all have had a very busy weekend. I appreciate that you're all still upright and mostly smiling and being here with us. Thank you.
So do you want me to get started or do?
Yeah, why don't you get started?
So section 30 of the amendments, we're jumping right in the middle, 30 out of 86 sections. Section 30 deals with the creation of regional assessment districts. It builds on the work that was started in Act 73 last year. The approach for my sections was to repeal a lot of the stuff from Act 73 and just plunk it back in new. And then what Ways and Means has done with regional assessment and with classifications is to kind of build out the framework that was there in Act 73 and fill in some of the details to make this administrable for the state in the future.
Okay, so in the section by section, it has all of Beth's things first. So those are the first, the education policy pieces were sections 1 through 29, basically.
Yes.
Okay. And then, okay.
And I would call out section 18 is changing the effective dates for Act 73. So that would be, that's in Beth sections, but that's one that's applicable throughout the entire amendment. So section 18 is one to be aware of. We have the timeline document that's available for you, but
Yes,
you want to.
we all have copies of that.
And so if you want to see effective dates for themselves, section 18 is a good place to look. If you actually went back to Act 73 to look at effective dates, it wouldn't be helpful because those effective dates are being amended in this document.
Okay. All right, so we'll start with this section 30. Lynn.
Can you refer to pages? Oh, you've got the summary. But if you're talking from the bill, can you give?
I don't have the pages in front of me, but I can tell you the section numbers. It's the best.
I don't know, but it's.
Yeah.
Well, if we start with section 30, Lynn, that's on page
29.
29.
So in section 30, you'll see the establishment of regional assessment districts. Like I said, a lot of it is based off of what was in Act 73 on regional assessment, but it's been fleshed out further here. The effective date's been pushed back to January 1st, 2031 for this. That's pushing it out a year. Um,
Will you remind us what regional assessment districts are?
yeah, I know, there's so much groundwork to lay. I haven't even
There,
started.
yeah, it's- because we haven't talked about that in this committee.
What it does is, so currently, the way that we handle, for one thing, when you hear about regional assessment districts, you should think about mass reappraisals for a municipality.
So this is about grand lists.
It's about grand lists, about getting a value on the grand list to which, tax rates get applied for property taxes. The way the valuation process works now is every municipality is on its own to not only maintain its grand list from year to year, and then when it comes up to do a mass reappraisal, it's on its own to organize that and to have it done. We have a per parcel fee from the state to help pay for that, where municipalities receive some compensation for it, but it doesn't really match the full cost of these things. What regional assessment districts would do is we haven't gotten there yet, but in this language, the Department of Taxes would recognize boundaries for regional assessment districts, recommend those to the legislature, and in future session, you would actually set those boundaries. Those boundaries, the intent is to tie those to school districts. We don't know what that is yet, so there's a little bit of reason to wait for that. The idea is to have regional assessment districts that are made up of multiple school districts, municipalities that are able to contract together to have their mass reappraisals done. Under this language, under current law, technically, a municipality is required to do it every 6 years. It's just not feasible in a lot of cases because of the cost and
There aren't a lot of assessors, is what I also remember.
yeah, the lack of economy of scale. It's hard for a small municipality to attract a third-party assessor because they just not a lot in it for the assessing firm. So that's a big part of the problem that this is trying to resolve. So under this, in the long run, well, up to 2031, really, as this starts to incrementally roll out, you would have these regional assessment districts. They would have municipalities be able to jointly contract and have their mass reappraisals every 6 years done together. Along with that, there's language in here that is starting to flesh out the appeals process. Currently, it's all municipality based. So appeals are handled by municipalities. Under this system, when it comes to the mass reappraisals once every 6 years, there would be a RAD appeals board or regional assessment district appeal board that would also have the municipalities working together to handle valuation appeals specifically from the mass reappraisals. The year-to-year adjustments that are done for property valuation would still be handled by municipalities individually, and those appeals would also be handled by municipalities individually. But when it comes to mass reappraisals, we'll have the RAD system, and then we'll have the RAD appeals boards. PVR's role in this, that's property valuation and review, the division of the Department of Taxes that handles property valuation and property issues, would have a role in providing guidance and technical assistance and kind of working out some of the logistical parts. But a lot of the logistical parts are going to be handled by the municipalities within a RAD working together. So that's the 10,000 foot view of the RADs. And I can just move on from that. So section 31 is a conforming change to remove some of the current law provisions relating to reappraisals because the provisions are being replaced by the RAD system. Section 32 is a clarifying provision that clarifies that for the purpose of an equalization study, municipalities within a RAD will be treated as a single entity. You probably are aware that Property Valuation and Review every year does the equalization study, and that study is to assess how valuation is being done from municipality to municipality. And that's through that, following a statutory formula is how CLAs are applied through the equalization study. There's something called the coefficient of dispersion. And the whole idea is, for one, to record a bunch of information about our grand lists and valuations, but also those are used to try to make sure that when we go to apply education property tax, that it's apples to apples. That's why it's called equalization. We're trying to equalize the grand lists between municipalities.
So would this regional assessment district approach sort of minimize the swings in CLAs?
That's a big part of it is that if this is successful and that this can get the reappraisal schedules consistently for every municipality done every 6 years, that means there won't be large gaps, and that means that the grand list will be more accurate year to year. And being more accurate year to year means the CLEs will be closer to being accurate. And so
We won't have 78% of CLA or 115%.
that's the goal.
Closer to 100.
It would be close, being close to 100 means you're close to actually being accurate to the fair market value, means that the equalization system won't adjust you very much. So school districts could rely more on the actual values they have on the grand list when performing budgets. And you're aware, like, that's sometimes people are upset because they think that the landscape's one thing, CLA gets applied and they're like, whoa, what, the CLA ruined our day. It's like, that's not really, what happened. It was just that their information previously wasn't accurate. So yeah, it's to keep things closer to accurate, and to make it easier. So section 32, I think I said that about the equalization study. Section 33 moves the statute on PBR valuations of public utilities. PBR has taken on some of the valuation responsibility for tricky areas. Public utilities is one. Currently, that statute's located in the appeals chapter, but because of the RAD appeals boards, the property valuation appeals chapter, that chapter is actually being repealed here and it's being replaced with language that works for RADs. But since public utilities the statute is located in that chapter, we had to move it. So there's no change in the law. It's just a moving.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a moving of that to a more appropriate place. Section 34 has some repeals. The first repeals are the sections of Act 73 related to RADs because they're being replaced, including the transition language, which we'll get to in a minute. And then sub B of that section repeals the statutory chapter on property valuation appeals, which I was just talking about. But that, again, it's being adapted to RADs and it's being moved to a new location. Section 35 creates a new way to compensate municipalities for the costs of mass property reappraisals. So this section would, I mentioned earlier that under current law, the state helps pay for mass reappraisals by using a per parcel fee. That is the number of parcels within the municipality. They get an amount of money equal to the parcels multiplied by $8.50 a year. What this would do is it would actually keep that $8.50 per parcel fee in place, but that would be to compensate for grand list maintenance between reappraisal years. And then so the reappraisals are taken out of it, which are the significant cost. And that's being paid for through the Department of Taxes to help pay for a reappraisal that's upcoming. They would pay either $66 per parcel or 2/3 of the estimated cost of the reappraisal, whichever's lesser.
Lesser. Oh, okay. And not every assessment district would be evaluated in the same year. So it isn't like the whole state of Wisconsin.
That's crucial.
Over across the state
The vision here is that 1/6
would be.
1/6 of the municipalities would be doing it per year, more or less.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be the full cost of $66 per parcel every year. It would be $66 per parcel for 1/6 of municipalities every year. Section 36, and I would like to flag the effective date. It's a tricky one because as drafted, it is effective for July 1st, 2026. But that's because the language ties it to payment for reappraisals under the RAD system. So in hindsight, looking at it, probably should have made that effective along with the RAD system, but legally speaking, it makes no difference. Section 36 is a deleted section. This is at one point, the language created a new tax department position to handle the RAD appeals. This was going to be a hearing officer that handled just regional assessment district valuation appeals. This position wasn't going to be needed for some years to come. As you can see, there's a long timeline here, so it was removed. And it's not a need that has gone away, but it's not a need that's in the immediate future. Sections 37 through 52 are conforming changes relating to the repeal of the valuation appeals chapter and the moving of it to the RADS subchapter. There's 15 different places in statute where valuation appeals are cited and cross-referenced, and so we're changing all those cross-references. Section 54 is the report from the Department of Taxes relating to regional assessment district boundaries. That report will happen under this language on December 15, 2029. That is after some of the dust has settled when it comes to the setting up the foundation formula and possibly setting up new school districts. Because I think Beth would have gone over with you this November 7, 2028 date. Does that ring a bell or is that a John? Sorry.
You won't remember, it doesn't. Yeah.
Is it?
You don't know.
It is Beth. All right. So those things are all tied together. And that's why there's 3 attorneys working on this, because some of this stuff just can't be separated. Section 55 creates a process to allow municipalities to be reimbursed for abated education property taxes. This is not intricately related to anything else. This is just a valuation related change that's being made. This is for the short term. This is not part of the greater vision of everything else in here. But essentially there's a section allowing for the state to reimburse municipalities in very rare cases, relatively rare cases, where they've abated education property tax for an individual taxpayer based on a clear error or mistake probably made by the town itself in doing the valuation. In cases where that is corrected, the state will allow education tax to be abated also and will pay the municipality back for that abatement. Are there any questions about that? Okay. Section 56 is another one of these one-off things. It's this requires PBR to issue guidance relating to the valuation of manufactured home parks and limited equity cooperatives. It's effective on passage. It's an area of concern for some people about how valuation is done for these. So it's asking PBR to put some guidance out there so that it's done more consistently throughout the state. And that's it with RADs. At section 57, you start to enter into the property tax classifications changes. The 10,000 foot view here is that around 2029, Vermont will start transitioning to have under current law, we have 2 tax classifications, homesteads and non-homesteads. This would transition Vermont to having homestead, non-homestead, non-residential, and non-homestead residential as the 3 classifications. And under Act 73, there are tax rate multipliers that could apply so that the effective tax rates could be adjusted for each classification. One thing you should know is that the way that this is put together, the homestead classification as you know it stays the same. Anything that's a homestead right now is to be a homestead. And the way that the system works when it relates to homesteads stays the same. For example, under current law, if you have a business use of a part of your house that's your homestead, the portion that's a business use would be taxed as a non-homestead under current law based on the floor space. But the land and everything else associated with the homestead is taxed still as homestead. That treatment would stay the same. Any treatment we have for homesteads right now would stay the same. The changes here, though, are for what we consider non-homestead right now. So what we consider non-homestead right now would be divided into 2 categories. And those categories are based off of dwelling units and how those dwelling units are used. It's assumed that the non-homestead residential classification will be the one with a higher tax rate multiplier, which will have the higher taxes. The way a property would fall into that classification would be that there's a dwelling unit. That dwelling unit's not used as a homestead. That dwelling unit's not used as a long-term rental. a dwelling unit, should we go? That dwelling unit is fit for year-round habitation. It's not a mobile home. And after all of that, also it's not being used for employee housing. So after all of those parts of the definitions are met, and there's still a dwelling unit, and it's being used. Essentially, what this is trying to narrow it down to is it being used as a second home, or is it being used as a short-term rental, or is it just being unused in general? But it could be. That would be when the higher rate applies. That's what the definitions are trying to narrow it down to. Anything else that's non-homestead would be non-homestead, non-residential, and it would presumably have a lower rate than the second home.
Second home. So an apartment building would be a non-homestead,
Non-residential.
non-residential, because it's a business. Somebody owns the building and is renting out, and that's their business.
And all the dwelling units there would be used for long-term rentals, which would put them in the non-homestead,
Right, if they
non-residential.
were all being used for short-term rentals, it would be non-resident,
Yes.
non-homestead residential.
And so the administration of this has been very tricky, and the Department of Taxes issued a report that was required under Act 73. They did that going into this session, and that report was the basis for fleshing out a lot of the details here. So a lot of the administrative details are what are being fleshed out for the first time. And those administrative details are essentially, lost my train of thought. The first part is with assessing officials. And the only new role assessing officials will have at the municipal level is to identify the number of dwelling units for each property. So that's one piece of information that's being used to administer this. The other place where information is being gathered is a dwelling use attestation, which is a new form that would be submitted to the Department of Taxes, much like the homestead declaration. And if that form is not filed and a homestead declaration is also not filed for a parcel, then the way this is put together is that the highest rate would apply. So for property owners who know that the highest rate is going to apply to them, they don't actually have a filing requirement. They'll just have that applied. But a dwelling use attestation would be necessary for business properties that maybe have, it would be the apartments, it would be the ones that have dwelling units potentially that actually qualify as non-homestead, non-residential. So they would file a dwelling use attestation to make sure they don't get the highest rate, is more or less how it, so those two
There's
bits.
an incentive to do that.
Yes, and so it does create a new filing requirement for some property owners. But after, the tax submitted this report and they thought that an approach like this is the best that they could administer. So that's the approach being taken.
Okay. Dave, did you have a question?
Yes, can you explain to me any differences between, say, a ski resort with a large complex of, I'll use the word condominiums of units?
Mm-hmm.
The treatment of an entity like that versus a small apartment house with 3 units in a street in the village.
I'll start with the apartment house.
Mhm.
So the long-term rental is defined as renting it out for periods of at least 30 days, but total at least 6 months in the year.
How many?
So the rental period needs to be at least 30 days. So you're at least
Yep.
renting it by the month.
Okay,
And then for 6 months total, so at least half the year.
okay,
And so if a dwelling unit is being rented in that way, or more than that, then it would be that unit would be considered non-homestead, non-residential. In very niche situations, we have a definition of a dwelling unit that's based off of certain characteristics about it, including the ingress and egress and things like that. So sometimes units would be eliminated from the non-homestead residential characterization because the dwelling units don't qualify also. Just wanted to footnote that, but that's like way in the weeds. But the beginning of your question starts with that. So I think the apartment in town is probably going to fall into that and be considered non-homestead, non-residential. The resort, it just depends on the nature of the circumstances. The definitions would have to be applied. If these are long-term rentals though, and with the resort properties, then they could be classified as non-homestead, non-residential. If they tend to be short-term rentals, they could end up qualifying as non-homestead residential if it's like a short-term rental type situation. But if it's more like a hotel situation, that's when you get into the other weeds of the definitions I was talking about with ingress and egress and all of that. But the idea is that hotels will not be considered short-term rentals.
Hotels are a business, but if you own a condo at Spruce Peak in Stowe, if you lived there all year round, it probably would be your primary homestead if you lived in your condo at Spruce Peak.
Yes.
If you rent it out because you put it on Airbnb or VRBO, then it's a non-homestead residential because it's a short-term rental.
Yes. Or it could be.
Thank you.
Different.
So it's rented out, but they're only there.
But it's a second home.
It's a second home.
Right.
So there's a very, you can see there's very much a use-based component, and that's why the dwelling use attestation is important. That information is primarily going to be gathered by the property owner themselves, submitting how they're using the property. It's very similar to the homestead declaration in that way.
Building on what Dave asked, if you are a ski area and they have a bunch of condominiums that they're using essentially through their central booking, well, like a JPEG, they have lots of condominiums that are owned by individuals all over the place, but they don't rent it themselves. They rent it through the
You have a property manager who's doing it.
JPEG is the property manager. So the issue is that you really don't, sometimes they're occupied, sometimes they're not, sometimes it's every week, sometimes it's only on the weekends. It's really like a hotel. There are condo hotels.
But who owns the property?
It's owned by somebody who owns that particular unit, but they're not managing.
That's okay. I don't think that
So-
matters, right?
So is that a hotel or how does that function? Who's doing the booking?
Short-term rental, right?
It's short-term.
We'll let the lawyer answer the question.
I don't know if I followed all of your details, and I think that's the important thing is that the owner will file the dwelling use attestation, right? So if you are a renter of a condo unit or whatever, that's, it's the owner, so it matters whether each unit is owned individually, or if there's one owner of the entire complex, right? That's going to matter. But the owner would submit the dwelling use attestation, and for every unit, they would give the amount of floor space used and for what use it is. If they qualify as long-term rental for some of them, because you're going to have a situation and it has to be accounted for. So we're going way into the weeds on this, but that's okay. You could have a building that has some of those units are long-term rentals, some of those units are short-term rentals, right? The way that our language here accounts for that is you would take the total floor space of the building. For all of those that are long-term, they would get the non-homestead, non-residential classification. For those that are short-term, they would get the non-homestead residential classification. And then it's the proportion of floor space used for the entire building depends on how tax is applied. So if it's 60% of floor spaces is long-term rental, 40% is short-term rental, then that's how it will be put on the grand list. And so for 60% of the value, you would get the lower rate, and for 40% of the value, you get the higher rate in that case.
Okay, now there is a tax law that says that as an owner of one of these places, you can't write off or use it as a business if you stay there more than 2 weeks. If you buy a condo and you intend to rent it out as often as you can, I mean, maybe you don't do it all the time, but as often as you can, and you write everything off because it's a business,
Okay,
an LLC, like
okay.
with or without the LLC. But if you stay there more than 2 weeks, then the federal government will not let you do that write-off. So it has to be it's a limited amount of time you're allowed to stay there. Now, how does that conflict with this?
I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with it. I guess what I'm hearing from you is that for federal income tax purposes, you might have an incentive not to stay there.
Yes,
But it
it's a
doesn't,
2-week
but it wouldn't
timeline.
affect your use in any other way. If you own a unit and you're basically doing short-term rentals with it, and you stay there sometimes, that wouldn't affect the classification. In fact, if it was a long-term rental, and let's say you rent it out for 8 months in a year to one tenant for an 8-month period, and you stay there for 4 of the months, that would it would still be classified as long-term or as
Or Vermont.
non-homestead, non-residential. You wouldn't get the second home rate in that case. It would be considered a long-term rental.
So I think we are getting a little too far in the weeds on this now, and if you've got, I mean, there's a sort of a joke about flashcards and ways, but they actually do have flashcards. So I've got all of these questions and more that we haven't thought of have been asked in these meetings. The point is that we're gonna have a second home tax classification defined as we've defined it here. So that's part of what's going on here. Let's continue.
Yeah, and I would say that, I mean, the picture, compared with Act 73, the picture is clearer under this language about how exactly this is gonna work. Section 60 has transition provisions. During calendar year 2029, the Department of Taxes is going to have to gather information like the dwelling use attestation type information we're talking about in order to implement the system in 2030, the next year. There are contingencies here. As a reminder, both the RADs and the classifications have many of the same contingencies as the foundation formula. Section 61 repeals several sections from Act 73 relating to property tax classifications because those are being replaced, very similar to what is going on with RADs. Section 62 is an intent section that says that it's the General Assembly's intent that the tax classification system will be reevaluated whenever the General Assembly sets tax rate multipliers, because that is the big open piece that's still to be done on classifications right now. Section 63 is a prospective repeal of the main sections. If the new tax rate multipliers are not set by July 1, 2030. And the last part is Section 64, which amends the current definition of homestead to make sure that a lot of the treatment that's happening under classifications is kind of belt and suspenders repeated in the homestead definition to avoid any ambiguity about whether homestead is to be treated any differently. And the goal is for it to not be. That's it for me.
Instruction two, or you know?
I am not speaking
Okay.
instruction on that.
So if you're able to stay, that would be great. And this is John. So perfect, because then we'll have the treasurer's office come in and talk to us about the other part of this from their perspective. So that works well.
Hello. John Gray, Office of Legislative Counsel. Let me find one of the many open emails I have that contains.
Your calendar.
Yeah, I had like just a ton of windows open. That was one of them, so it should be.
Are we moving to a different document?
We still using the section by
You
section?
can still use that if
Why do we still use
would
it?
prefer.
Thank you.
I think that is working for people. Thank you.
Is this a charger?
You have a charger somewhere?
Get it.
You've learned that you all are so busy.
Thank you very much. My laptop is struggling, so. Should be back to life now. Okay. Going to bring chair. And I'll try to zoom in, so this is a bit better. Great. So my section start with section 65, which if you were looking at the text of the bill itself, begin on page 74, but I will be sticking with the section by section for now. And my sets of sections relate primarily to school construction, but they also touch some of the transition measures from Act 73 for the end. I try to go sort of quickly if possible, just knowing the 2 o'clock piece. So broadly, for orientation purposes, Oftentimes we gloss over intent language, but I think for understanding these sets of sections, it's actually very helpful to look at the intent language here. So section 65 is expressing the intent, General Assembly in H 955 for the updates to the school construction sections. And I've called out two particular pieces here in the section by section summary that I think are nice for laying out the timeline. In the short term, the legislature's intent is to catalyze the program by providing state aid in the form of an additional $50 million annually in state bonding capacity to support school construction. If you're going to hear about this, this is just intent language at this point.
Right.
There's
We're
language.
not committed, and if we vote on yes on this bill, we are not committing to $50 million in school construction aid. There's a lot that has to be done, but this is like, if in the ideal world where we can do that and it makes sense, that's what we would like to do.
And we'll see we won't see the text, but there's a provision later on to get a recommendation from the treasurer in consultation with CDAC on what that appropriate annual bonding capacity level should be.
Okay.
So that's short term, provide this additional $50 million annually in state bonding. In the long term, provide state aid in the form of a debt service subsidy to school districts. That's the kind of aid that was provided in Act 73 last, or set out in Act 73 last year. Well, it's not effective yet. And these would go effective July 1, 2026. Section 66 is speaking to the staffing levels for the school construction division of the AOE. Among the many reports that AOE was tasked with producing under Act 73, they were required to come back with some requests. And included among these was staffing for the school construction division. And that's what you see set out here. Authorizes 4 permanent classified positions to staff the school construction division. It does not contain any appropriation. In fact,
We authorize the positions, but not the money. Are the positions in the budget too? I'm sort of looking at Chair Kornheiser here. Or these aren't in the budget, are they? The 4 positions? I don't think they are.
For next year either.
yeah, the request in subsection B of this section, which you can't see, is to have AOE submit as part of its FY28 budget
Okay,
appropriate funding levels for these positions.
okay, so we are not dealing with it in this year's budget.
Everything is in the front.
Okay, thank you.
Section 67 is giving some specificity to the delegation of rulemaking authority to the Agency of Education. Under Act 73, they're granted rulemaking powers. You'll know that the existing program, while under moratorium, has the State Board of Education with rulemaking authority. Act 73 changed it so that AOE has that rulemaking authority. And this specific section, Section 67, requires AOE to adopt rules on school construction by March 31st, 2027. It's worth noting they will have had transferred to them the state board's rules. So they're not starting from and specifically, they would need to include rules to address prioritization and bonus incentives that align sort of with the goals of this bill. And then also how to treat outstanding capital indebtedness as of December 31st, 2025. So broad rulemaking authority, that authority already exists, but this is specifying 2 particular sets of rules that need to happen and imposing a deadline. Section 68 is, you may recall that Act 73 stood up an advisory board to assist with the rollout of the state aid program. Unlike the other provisions of the state aid program that go effective this summer, that advisory board already exists. There's already been 1 report that came in December, I believe. This is a section that tasks that advisory board with providing a report to the General Assembly by the end of this year, so December 1, 26, that identifies opportunities for school construction that support the consolidation of school governance structures and improve access to educational opportunities for public school students. If you are looking at the text of the bill, you're going to see that call out to consolidation of school governance structures and improved access for educational opportunities a number of times throughout. And that's kind of the generic call out to the goals of the act. So this is trying to tie report, intent, all of these pieces to the goals. So advisory board needs to identify opportunities for school construction that align with that goal. For each opportunity, provide a siting study that would include like location and cost and the like, and then evaluate statewide scenarios for pursuing multiple opportunities. You can imagine the advisory board identifying different opportunities, not all of which are consistent with each other, right? Maybe geographic proximity would mean that this school can't work with that school. And so the last piece here is saying, consider these holistically as a statewide scenario. What would be the avenue for pursuing multiple options?
Yes. So just, and I see you, Lynn, just a quick question, and I may have missed it. So does this advisory board exist now?
Yes, we do.
When did we create it?
In Act 73 last year.
Last year.
If the one.
Are there actual names associated with with this board at this point? Because I don't see it yet. I'll go into more of that. Go ahead.
Okay, when I read Act 76 last summer, it appeared to me that this was going to be a change from what we've had in the past. You know, you had a community decide or a school district decide they were going to build a building or add on to a building or whatever. They went to the public, they had hearings, they went out a bond vote, they got the bond vote passed by the community, and then they just went to the bond bank or whatever you go to get started, get the plans and all that. The way I read it is this advisory board functions more like a CON process that we have in hospitals, where you have a, you have to present your plan. And I can't remember if it's voted first or afterwards, but the point of it is you have to go and plan for what you want to do, go to this advisory board or some other kind of entity to go, and they prioritize which are the most, maybe like the transportation committee does.
Sure.
You have the,
Yep.
you prioritize them based on needs. Some may not get any authority to do it,
Sure.
and some may say, yes, but you got to also do it with the school over here or do something. And is that what this now says?
So the simple question to this is that this is purely for the availability of state aid. School
Yes,
districts are free
that's
to
right.
pursue school construction projects, but if you want to receive aid, you need to meet the eligibility conditions. You need to be prioritized to get first access to funds, and that would include the advisory board's advice on what the particular correct projects to appropriate are. There's a process envisioned for annual budget submission that would include the projects that should be prioritized, right, subject to rulemaking. So I wouldn't say that this changes anything about the way that school districts can pursue school construction projects, but if they want to avail themselves of state aid, they will need to go through this process. And I think part of what you're identifying is that this has been under moratorium for
Yes.
many, 20 years effectively. So it would change the process that folks have for pursuing school construction, but that's really just the way that a process would change by kicking online any state aid provisions with eligibility conditions, regardless of the particular structure that's done here. Does that help?
Yes, well, I'm working under the theory most school districts or whatever would probably not proceed without,
absence of it.
without
Sure.
the state aid, construction aid.
Yes, and so, I mean, high level, the way to think about it is it's Act 73, this bill are recognizing limited funds available, direct state funds to projects that align with explicit goals of the legislature as stated in intent language, both in Act 73 and here, and also in the rulemaking that AOE will do, including those rules we just talked about, which try to draw in the same intent for consolidation of school governance structures and improved educational access.
Yeah, but prior to the moratorium, when we did have school aid construction aid, there was no requirement for you. Once you started and got the project going, you got on a list and
Sure.
turned out to be a long waiting list in the end.
You are correct.
But they didn't have to get authorization to start. They were able to just go ahead and do it.
The prioritization now is different. Yes, I think that's the.
Just want to double check.
Let's
Thanks.
keep going.
Section 69 is jumping into amending the state aid for school construction chapter of Title 16. And this is just including in the statement of policy, which is kind of a general intent section for the chapter, exactly the things that we're talking about. State aid program is, the legislature is expressing intent to prioritize school construction projects that align with the creation of new school governance structures and leverage that additional state bonding capacity to support those projects. Unless you think that intent language has no effect at all, I would note that in the state aid chapter, some of the intent pieces are pulled into the way that rulemaking is done. So it's factored into the way that rulemaking is. It's one of the cabining of discretion. Section 70 is just clarifying that the AOE's annual school construction funding request must include any requests for projects for funding through state funding. That's implicit in the things we've talked about before and also in some sections that come later. Section 71 clarifies that the State Aid for School Construction Advisory Board shall have the assistance of the School Construction Division at AOE and the program director of that division. And it cleans up a time-limited provision that's now passed. So there was a report that was due the end of last year. It's struck for planning purposes. Section 72, this is your big section to pay attention to, 16 VSA 3445. Every time I talk about this, I call it the kind of core state aid provision. This sets out the application process and the award of construction aid. And so section 72 amends the statute that governs that application and approval process to, we talked about this first bullet, require AOE to identify those projects that would be supported by state bonding. And then it sets up the process for legislative appropriation, or the beginning of that process, require the House committees on education and on Ways and Means and their Senate counterparts to recommend a total school construction appropriation. It amends the award provisions. You may recall from last year that the award provisions were in the form of a debt service subsidy model that ranged from 20 to 40% of eligible debt service costs. Now what's being contemplated is, or what you see in this bill is aid of 50 to 95% of the total approved cost of the project. And it could be in multiple forms. It could be debt service subsidy, support through state bonding, or it could be a combination of both of those.
So when we say debt service subsidy, just to be clear, is that just paying the interest on the bond, or is it actually paying some of the principal as?
Paying some of the principal. Yep. So the idea is that locally you would vote the full version of, you would vote the full authorization for the project, right? And then the state kicks in aid to cover a specified percentage of the full debt service costs each year, which would be your principal and interest. So it could be a substantial portion depending on the awarded. But yes, it's not just interest.
Wow, because I was the school board chair when we did one of our very last, the last ones at my elementary school, before school construction, they went, and the maximum was 30% then.
It was 30% for some, yeah.
So then you had to bond for the rest of it. Yeah, if you want to explain, Chair.
Yeah, so under the foundation formula, it's a very specific amount of money that is very specifically calibrated to cover day-to-day educational costs of the school and very specific day-to-day educational costs of the school. I named sort of some of the things that are not included in it, but one of them is bonding debt, school construction costs. In order to have the foundation formula retain the equity that is built into it, we capped spending above that at a very, very low amount at 5%. And so the traditional way that we've done school construction and then had school debt be carried as part of the school budget just absolutely doesn't work under this new financing mechanism, because districts don't have permission to essentially raise those funds on their own. And so this system is a way, one, given that even when a district does that by themselves under current law, all the rest of us are carrying that cost. This mechanism recognizes that and seeks to better control those choices to meet our overall state policy goals, while recognizing that we want to be very, very careful with how we cover that debt, given that regardless of how it's raised, regardless of how it's decided, it's always a statewide debt, even under current law.
Right, so the control sort of on the front end of who gets the money, whose project gets approved, because we don't need 3 high schools within 5 miles of each other.
And there's no mechanism other than this in the future law to cover those kinds of debts.
Okay, thank you.
The next piece is something that was foreshadowed earlier. We talked about the intent language of that 50 million additional. Before final vote, there had been a similar provision at this application section to set out what the caps on debt service subsidy and what the cap on that annual state bonding capacity support would be. And what you see here is requiring the treasurer in consultation with CDEC to recommend that annual total state bonding support and the annual debt service subsidies to be awarded. This section also amends the sequencing of bond authorization application approval. You can think about this as a natural consequence of providing bonding support, right? The consequence of that is you don't know what to vote locally, so you know what your state award is, if your award is going to include any form of state bonding, because you would need to reduce the local vote on the bond. Otherwise, you would be supporting a bond with a bond, which is not the proposal. So this section also amends the sequencing of bond authorization and application approval so that a district knows it's awarded in advance of bonding. And lastly, it clarifies that existing prevailing wage requirements under both state and federal law for contracts awarded for school construction receiving state aid would apply. They're already independent existing law. Section 73, you may recall that the state aid for school construction program, which has been under moratorium.
Can we go back just a second? Okay, so the state's gonna subsidize some of your bond obligations. Did I just hear you correctly that you have to know how much the state is going to come in and put down for that particular bonding situation for the school? And then you can go to the voters to ask them for the remainder.
Yes, so
And then you will pay that out of your own funds, because the state has already subsidized the statewide funds similar to what we have now.
So it is like the way that it works now, and that like this would come online July 1, 2020. These are effective July 1, 2026. And so the current method of voting your bonds for school construction, and then those costs count toward education spending and are raised statewide, right? Although your district increases in per pupil spending as a consequence of that vote, because you have to cover the annual debt service costs. That mechanism is not disrupted by this provision. What's done here is, because some of your aid could come in the form of state bonding, which would necessarily reduce the amount that you need to bond.
Right.
You can't vote the bond right until you actually know what that state aid provision will be. So it complicates the sequencing, and there are definitely some questions as to how that should.
So the state's going to bond $100 million for school construction based on the priority list. They've decided that we put that in the budget. Is that correct? And so they'll distribute it out based on their priority list. And then if you have a gap as town A or school district A, you have to bond whatever's left over.
Is
that correct?
Can I attempt? So maybe another way of describing it that might be helpful is every district is gonna have a capital stack they need to put together to fund school construction. That capital stack will be made up of a few things. One of those things is the money that's given from the state held bond.
Right.
Some of that is the district held bond, which is then covered through a combination of state grants, essentially, to cover that debt, and and then locally raised funds, which are a secondary supplemental district spending mechanism. So in the most basic capital stack, will be covered through those three things: state bonds, grants from the state to cover local debt, and locally raised supplemental district spending as a separate kind of a new mechanism of supplemental district spending. We also anticipate some degree of public-private partnerships, which could be sort of a fourth piece of the stack, but that's more complicated than we need to get into right now.
Okay, so the number 3 one, which is your state, your local piece, is that part of that 5% or your?
No, we actually, no, and John.
You added to the 5%.
Bob.
Okay. All right.
Technical term.
Got it.
It's not like the old thing. It's a whole new.
And you have to add them, okay.
Okay, let's continue.
That explanation is perfect. So section 73, you may know that the existing state aid program has a prohibition on extending state aid to projects, the need for which results from significant deferred maintenance that might preclude aid to a vast portion of the school facilities portfolio. So this section 73 repeals that prohibition on state aid for those kinds of projects. Section 74 is a legacy debt aid provision. This is the creation of a new section. It makes available annual aid of up to $61 million, which would be subject to appropriation for those purposes, for 100% of the debt service cost, any debt that is incurred by a school district for costs related to facility construction and renovation as of December 31, 2025. I'm going to pause and go through each of the factors. So 100% coverage for legacy debt. And the idea is what kicks in as that kind of debt. You're getting 100% for the debt service costs, and it's on debt related to facility construction and renovation. This is the intent is a broader call out than capital indebtedness might conceivably capture the same thing, but there was some concern that perhaps planning and things that sort of necessarily accompany capital construction might not be grouped in. So 100% coverage for debt that relates to essentially school construction that exists for a school district as of December 31, 2025. So there's a time piece, there's a content piece, and then it's 100% aid.
So it's stuff that schools were doing
Exactly.
before they knew that we were going to be doing this stuff.
Exactly.
And so we're trying to do a hold harmless, more or less.
It's kind of trying to clear the slate is the way that I think of it, moving into a new.
And is
Funding
61 million coming from the general fund?
So the source of this funding is not resolved.
The ed fund.
It's the ed fund is the default, and is 61 million the total of all the, what we expect people are gonna ask for legacy debt? You sort of added it all up and that's what it came up to?
It is the worst year as I understand. It's the highest year as I understand.
Okay.
For debt service costs.
Okay, so it's based on actual data that we have somewhere. Okay. Thank you.
Section 75 and 76, don't think we have to spend too much time. This is kind of a non-substantive provision that just makes clear that your education payment will include a host of things, including your school construction aid. You're just going to be grouped together. So under your current funding formula, that would include ed spending, grants, and also your construction aid. In the future, it would include EOP, SDS, and this construction aid. And it's hit twice because we have to amend it now and when the foundation formula rolls out, assuming contingencies are met. Section 77, we just talked about this piece. The supplemental district spending cap of 5% that you know from Act 73 does not apply to school construction expenditures. So there's no restriction on that piece other than the practical question of whether you can finance it on your, at the rates that you'll have to pay, which is a standard reality everyone has to confront under any funding formula. Section 78 amends the form of the school budget ballot. There was a question that came up in Ways and Means as to whether a district might vote a bond in a particular year and then not in subsequent years authorize supplemental district spending to cover the debt service costs. I will just say that that's the same situation that exists in the current situation where you approve a bond and then you have to include it in your ed spending each year. But what's included in 955 is new ballot language that would say you only submit supplemental district spending to cover those ongoing annual costs for debt service costs for school construction at the initial authorization of the bond. And then it provides two ballots for clarity, one for that initial incurrence of the bond and one for sort of regular SDS. I can be quick through the remainder. These are foundation formula transition measures. Section 79 repeals transition measures in Act 73, not for substantive reasons, but to update to reflect the new timeline. And it amends the Ed Fund Advisory Committee directives. Sections 80 through 82 are exactly these pieces. This is your EOP transition, your supplemental district spending cap transition, and your homestead property tax rate transition. No substantive changes to any of these pieces from Act 73, just aligning the timeline with that here. Section 83 similarly is an existing section from Act 73, and the request was to delay the tax report on the homestead rate transition by 1 year to December 15th, 2028. You'll see the full text of it in the bill because I also had to correct an issue with the effective date of the underlying section of Act 73.
Marty.
On the supplemental or the transition gap that's described in
Yes.
81 and 82, I think. Are these the same
Yes.
ones that we discussed before?
They are the same. The difference, the meaningful difference is, and I don't have the text in front of me right now, but what I recall is I did have to update the years for the call out, right, for the gap itself. So we still reference the FY25, but you're getting the latest possible gap you could be identified, like the most up-to-date information free foundation formula rollout. So same concept that was in Act 73, but trying to reflect that updated timeline.
Because I was trying to run through those and I didn't.
Yeah. Section 84, similar to Section 83, it delays in Act 73 Department of Tax report on the homestead exemption structure, in this case by 2 years to the same date, December 15th, 2028. And then Section 85 amends the statute that creates the Ed Fund Advisory Committee and makes it, I'll use the language that I received in email, a bit more technocratic. It reduces the membership to 6 members of the public with expertise in financing plus 1 rep from the Vermont School Boards Association with expertise in financing. It narrows the committee's responsibilities and delays that first meeting to 2031 after the rollout of the foundation formula. In short, it makes this not a transitional committee that is assisting throughout the process. It makes it something that kicks in post foundation formula rollout. That is it.
Thank you.
Sure.
And thank you. We've got the treasurer's office, folks from the treasurer's office here. We've just talked about school construction and bonding. And so we're going to have them talk And then we'll have Julia come up with the statement. So thank you all for hanging out and sticking with us. It's nice to see you.
Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, if you want to come and bring a chair with you. Don't mind. Thank you. Sort of coming on short notice.
Of course.
Appreciate it. You did hear about school construction. You walked in just as we were going over the school construction aid. Bonding is involved. I know the treasurer's office at some point would be making a recommendation, and you're not doing that today. But at least we'll get to hear. You take it over.
Thank you, Madam.
Yourselves and take it away, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the committee. For the record, David Chair, Deputy Treasurer.
Scott Baker, Director of Debt Management.
And as the chair mentioned, we are, the treasurer himself has not taken a position on the bill or on any aspect of the bill, but we have been throughout the process happy to provide some technical advice around bonding capacity, some of the risks around increasing the debt burden on the state, as well as ways to mitigate some of that risk. So without any further ado, I will turn it over to our Director of Debt Management, and he can talk a little bit about the state's bonding capacity, how some of the predictions and assumptions have been arrived at through the CDAC and through our financial advisors, and we're happy to answer other specific questions as well.
And thank you for bringing copies. I seem to have more copies than the, and this is posted on, okay, and it's posted for those who want.
You should start because I'm
Okay.
having some technical difficulties, but I'm glad you have paper copies and we'll get it on the screen in a moment.
Okay, so basically talking about bonding capacity for the state, it starts with CDAC, the Capital Debt Affordability Advisory Committee. And that's made up of the state treasurer, secretary of administration, representative from the bond bank, 2 governor's appointees, 1 treasurer appointees, and 2 non-voting members, the state auditor and the legislative economist. They meet annually and issue a report by September of each year with a recommendation to the governor and the legislature of how much debt the state can prudently issue. Based on a number of factors, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, but this year they look at a number of scenarios and they run 10-year projections based on issuances of certain size. It is a recommendation for the biennium, so a 2-year recommendation. So in September 24, they came out with a 2-year recommendation. They looked at authorization levels. They ran scenarios at 100 million, 108, 123.08, which is the prior year biennium, and the highest of 172 million. And that amount was based on the 10-year capital plan from the administration, what they were using for this at biennium plus 8 years forward, came out to, $86 million per year. So that was the high of the scenario that was run. So based on that, based on those scenarios, a number of factors, CDAC issued a recommendation of 100 million for the biennium, or roughly 50 million per year. And that's the amount that goes into the capital bill for all the projects that are authorized. It's per 100 million for the biennium. The reason it was lower, it has been going down for the past several years, but there were a number of factors, such as just the economic volatility, the fact that there was still supply chain issues. They could not get contractors to do the work. The administration spoke and said that basically they were not able to spend more than 50 million in that biennium. So no sense in issuing debt if you're not going to be able to do the projects. This past September 2025, they met again and affirmed the 100 million. Again, they do a 2-year recommendation, but they meet in the off years and they can adjust that if needed.
Answer the question. Go ahead.
So the 100 million is based on what they could actually get out the door, the money, right? Not how much we could endure in terms of debt and service debt.
Correct.
So what, you get any estimate of what we could have serviced for debt?
Yes, we will get that, yes. So the next slide shows what the authorizations have been for the last 20 years. And you can see since the 2014-15 biennium, it has been constantly reducing the debt. One important note is that whatever the CDAC recommendation has come in at, the legislature has always followed that recommendation and put that amount into the capital bill. That's something that the rating agencies have given us a lot of credit for. Very important to have that outside source and the agreement among all. So that's been important. The next slide, just wanted to point out one of the reasons that it was that it was kept at 50 million. You can see that this shows the actual bond issuances and authorizations over the years. That last bar, the green bar at the end, represents authorized but unissued debt. And so what that represents is our projects that have been authorized to be spent, but projects are not going forward right now. So we're not going to issue the debt until we're actually spending it. So
So that's the answer to my question.
I have a question on the debt levels. You know, post-pandemic construction costs have gone up 30% or more, or whatever. I mean, inflation and all of those things. But so how do you account for that in here? Because it feels like we aren't.
I mean, that is a risk. A lot of these projects go back several capital bills at a certain amount, and with inflation, you know, that amount may not cover.
But I mean, how do you think about it going forward? Not just the ones that don't go out the door, but when you figure out how much debt the state can reasonably borrow, do the rating agencies, do other people look at inflation? Because $50 million in 2016 is not like $50 million in 2026.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that is discussed. And that is, you know, one reason to bond is if you do have high inflationary rates, you know, bond for it and pay for it in the future. It's something that, you know, they always look at debt levels according to inflation, and the amount of this authorization is actually quite low.
Right.
Especially given, you know, inflation, but
So
No.
when we make the decisions, when CDAC makes the decisions, they don't take inflation into consideration.
They do look at that. So the main things they look at, so CDAC benchmarks our debt metrics to AAA rated states. And there are about 17 states that have at least 2 AAA ratings. And we use Fitch, S&P, and Moody's. Vermont is rated the second highest notch, AA+ with S&P and Fitch, AA1 with Moody's, the second highest. But generally when we price as if we were a AAA rated state because we do not issue a lot of debt. You know, we're a small state. It's pretty well received. There's a lot of demand for it. So that's why we benchmark against AAA rated states. The better your rating, the lower your interest costs. So the more you are going to save. Other states have been issuing less debt. So when CDAC does, you know, metrics comparing against those states, all the other state metrics are going down. So, you know, I mean, they do look at that, but yeah, it's all relative to other states as well. So
when we're paying off bonds that are out 20, say 18, 20 years old, are we paying them off with a depreciated dollar? In a sense, essentially, we're getting.
Sort of, yeah. So when we issue, by statute, we issue 20-year bonds, maturing in equal or diminishing levels. So if we did $100 million bonds, it'd be 5 million maturing each year for 20 years. There's generally a lockout of 10 years, so we can't refund those. But every time we do an issue, we look at the older bonds, and if we're able to have some cost savings, we will refund those, kind of like refinancing your mortgage, right? So we'll issue newer bonds to pay off the older ones. So yeah, in effect, that's what you're doing. Right now, the the oldest bonds we have outstanding are from 2015. So yeah, so they're only 10 years old. So the ones issued before that have pretty much all been refunded. So.
Another question here from John.
Just real quick, so as we're thinking about, bonding projects here over time here, like these state buildings and school, so things here. Where's the contingency, for cost of a project? Where would that lie? Would that be part of the bonding part of things here as well, or would that be part of more of the pieces you were going to describe? School construction.
The contingency that's built into the overall project is kind of, that would be local. Yeah, and one of the things that is different about this version of state school construction program compared to our previous school construction program is that things, making sure that all of that is in place and well planned is going to be very tightly facilitated by the state school construction. Because it's really important to have all those in place and that is very effective.
I assume so.
Yeah.
Clarification on that. Thank you.
Right. So recently, along with this, we were asked to analyze the state's issuance, and although CDAC recommended 100 million or 50 million per year, we were asked with the school construction bill coming out, how much could we do? And still stay within our benchmark. So that's the way we went about it. So this first chart shows, this is the current projection of 50 million per year or 100 million for the biennium. And these are the three main metrics, debt metrics that we look at. The first section, debt per capita. The second, debt as a percent of personal income, and the last one, debt service as a percent of revenue. The top part of each box shows the past 10 years. The bottom part of the page shows the 10-year projections, as if we were going to issue this amount every year for the next 10 years. Also taking into account the authorized but unissued amount being issued over the next several years. So what this shows is the shaded piece shows that our debt per capita will be outside the state guidelines. So that the shaded piece shows what the Vermont projected debt per capita will be. The column right next to it shows what we're trying to benchmark against the state guideline, and that represents the AAA rated states, their average debt per capita going forward. So this is one of the metrics that CDAC looks at, although this is probably the least important of these three, because we are a small population state. A debt per capita tends to be a little bit higher. It's something the rating agencies look at, but not weigh it very heavily. So we've been out of compliance in debt per capita for quite a while, and it's not the most important. So CDAC, doesn't pay much attention. The next column, debt as a percent of personal income, kind of shows what, the taxpayer, what their tax burden is, and set the state guideline going forward at 1.8%. This number is pretty volatile among the other states, kind of goes from 1.6 up to 2.1 or so. We just picked the 1.8 guideline, stick to that. And you can see at issuing 50 million per year, going forward, we're in compliance with the state guideline for the next 10 years. The last section, debt service as a percent of revenues, kind of represents the ability for the state to pay the debt. And this set the state guideline at 4% of revenues. This is in the past, this last biennium, CDAC just lowered the guideline from 6% to 4%. Back when we had a lot of debt, it was 8%. And so that's, as our debt load has come down, this has come down as well. One important note is, our debt, we have about 550 million of outstanding general obligation debt. the rating agencies are paying more and more attention to long-term liabilities, meaning your pension and OPEB liabilities now. So even though we have 500 million of debt, we have 4 billion of long-term liabilities. So, yeah, it's something they're paying more attention to.
So in the first one, we aren't doing so well, but in items, columns 2 and 3, we would still be below what our state guidelines were.
Correct.
Even if we borrowed the 50 million a year.
Well, so this is what we're doing now. This is what is in the capital bill, 50 million per year.
Projection of 50 million. Okay, got it.
Right. So the next slide here
Okay.
shows if we did an additional 50 million, so 100 per year. So that would represent what's in the capital bill now plus another 50 million.
Okay.
And so we ran the projections, and again, the debt per capita, as you'd expect, still out of compliance. The debt was as a percent of personal income and debt service as a percent of revenue, we still stay within the state guidelines.
So same answer, but just I was getting the wrong chart. Okay. So
Right.
we're in better shape for 2 and 3. We're fine. We're under the guideline.
Right, yeah, and again, the one of the scenarios that CDAC looked at was 86 million per year based on the 10-year capital plan. This was slightly more, but we're still in compliance. So 100 million, again, this isn't a CDAC recommendation. This was just what we were asked to run, so.
Right. Wait.
And we paid into the pension to try to draw that down, right?
Yes,
So as we pay into that, pay $100 million into the pension, how much benefit do we get in terms of how much we could draw in bonds?
so it is a factor that we're looking into. These debt metrics don't take the pensions into account. We do look at the debt metrics in comparison to that. And it's something CDAC looks at. It's not included in here, but
It would help.
yeah, as the pensions are getting paid down by 2038 and 48, that's going down. So yeah, the debt, you could certainly, yeah, that would make a difference. Again, it's a little ways to go on the pensions, but we're making good progress on it. So the third scenario that we ran was an additional 100 million on top of the CDAC recommendation of 50. So it'd be the capital bill plus 100 million. And you can see all three metrics are out of compliance in that. So again, this just represents using the CDAC guidelines under, that we're currently using, issuing at these levels, whether we would be in compliance of those guidelines or not. So anyways, so that's what we were asked to do. That's where we came up with the additional 50 million.
Yeah.
I think that was talked
It's
about.
like, that was the Goldilocks one. It's just right. Great. Thank you. Any questions from the meeting? This was really helpful. I really appreciate you coming in short notice.
Of course. And just to note, the treasurer does recognize the importance of this issue and is happy to keep working.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that there will be the appropriate time to make a recommendation, but it doesn't have to be straight.
Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. Committee, how are we doing? Do you want 5 minutes to take a break before we go, or do you want to just keep plugging through?
How much more is there?
We are going to hear from Beth, maybe briefly, if you have anything more to say to us, and then Julia is going to do the fiscal note, and then we're going to take a break and think about it all. Want to keep on going? If you need to take a break, take a break. Okay.
have a time?
Yeah.
I know.
Oh, it's going to be mostly Julia. Beth, why don't you join us since you've come in? Do you need a clementine? Or 10?
No, I'm okay, thank you.
Okay.
Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. I did have several sections in the Ways and Means Amendment
Okay,
that were me.
great. And we have the section by section if that's,
Whatever you would prefer to use.
well, it's what we've been using.
Oh, okay,
So
great.
if you don't mind.
Not at all.
Okay.
And are you wanting me to show it on the screen?
Are you able to do that?
Yes.
Okay, why don't we do
Is it
that?
posted on your website?
It should be posted on our website, and some of us have paper copies and some of us don't.
Okay.
But Herbie started with section 30, so I assume you have the sections before that.
Everything before that.
Okay.
You just sign into the Zoom.
You all set? Oh, you're hosting.
Okay, so we're gonna go all the way back up to the first instance of amendment. Did you guys get oriented into the instances at all yet? No?
We may have, but
Okay.
go ahead and do it again.
So there are several instances of amendment to the underlying bill as introduced, which was House Education's work. And then instance 8 is all of the brand new sections that Ways and Means added. So I'm gonna take you through the first 7 instances of amendment and then the first few sections of the 8th instance of amendment. So the first instance of amendment was to section 4 in the underlying bill, and it was that appropriation change that we talked about last week. It's been so long. Several times, the Ways and Means amendment does this where we are just not changing the amount of an appropriation, but making the appropriation an allowable use of the Act 73 Education Transformation Appropriation that is amended in the budget in section C-103. So that's all the first instance of amendment was. The second instance of amendment was to section 13, which is that long section on Union School District creation, consultation, and facilitation. And it adds a requirement that when the facilitators are forming study committees, they should also be taking into consideration, along with what the underlying bill requires, grand list values, accounting for the homestead exemption and current education spending.
What does that mean?
So when they're looking at grand list, my understanding, and I'll,
What?
my friends on this, okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one of the pieces of this new process is ideally, when we have new districts, they might have grand list, like total grand list values that are comparable to each other. So that the difference in essentially the cost of raising revenue would be similar from district to district. That was a provision in Act 73 when it was around sort of designing districts.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that as districts are managing this themselves a little bit more, we're supporting them to think about this really important piece of some degree socioeconomic diversity, but also something that will make a big difference in easing consistency from district to district for tax responsibility.
So some grand list regional districts might have a much higher grand list than some other, because different areas of the state have different
Yeah,
grand
and
lists.
so a great example is sort of in some versions of the draft maps of education put together. Barnard and Woodstock were in a district with like one of those middle ski towns. And if you, I don't really remember, but if you put White River Junction or Hartford in with that, it would really like stabilize the grand list and bring it much closer to the grand list values of the district that was south of that. Just by way of example.
Right, okay,
And this doesn't mandate it, it just reminds them to think about such things.
think about those things. Wayne?
That's my question was, you're not giving any instructions or other than for them to think about it. But you're not giving them any, if it's this way, you do this, if it's this way, you do that, or it's, no.
So the underlying language that came from House Education, didn't, and so we didn't want to upset the apple cart of all the hard and good work that they had done. We just wanted to add in this little, don't forget about this.
Thanks.
Third instance of amendment, section third, we're still in the same section, the Union School District Creation, Consultation, and Facilitation. Adding a new subdivision 6 to subsection B that requires facilitators to monitor the work of the General Assembly related to education transformation and share the most up-to-date fiscal modeling with study committees. So if JFO publishes a report or some modeling, the facilitators are required to be aware of it and share it with the study committees. Fourth instance of amendment is to section 17, study committee reimbursement grants. And I'm just going to summarize this very quickly by saying these are all of the various grants to start up CSAs, to fund the study committees, to fund the facilitators, et cetera. There were some slight changes to the language, but by ways and means, but the underlying concepts remain the same. The big substantive changes in this fourth instance of amendment are the where the money's coming from. So instead of a brand new appropriation, all of the appropriations in section 17 have been made an allowable use of that Act 73 education transformation money that was amended in the budget under section C 103.
Right. So when we think about our role in this, the general fund has already been, the money's already been accounted for in the budget, but this is going to have the language that will further clarify how that money gets spent. We tried to do what we could in the budget, but we were pretty general. And this is the amendment I was expecting to see around this. So Wayne?
So in the budget originally, what we put in there wasn't, had some cushion extra that this comes out of, or was it anticipated? No?
No, there wasn't. I mean, the Agency of Education asked for $4 million for transformation. We tried to press them on specifics last year and they weren't really able to give us specifics. We had some, but not a lot. But now that we are getting into having more specifics on the bill, we can designate the money more clearly. So that's what this does.
Do we have a problem though in that it's general fund to the AOE, but in section 17B, the 442,000 is going to the Vermont LC. Do we need to make a change on that?
One of the changes that Ways and Means made that I skipped over in the interest of time is that they changed who that appropriation is going to. And so it's going to AOE now.
We'll then further give it to.
Right, I understand that. It's not in their draft bill, is it?
In whose draft bill?
Ways and Means?
Yes, it is. It requires that AOE grant that money to the Learning Collaborative within 45 days of passage.
Yes. Okay. All right.
Fifth instance of amendment is an amendment to section 18, which is amending the effective dates in Act 73, most specifically the foundation formula contingencies.
Right.
I'm trying to think of how to summarize this.
Well, it goes out a year or 2 years or whatever based on what the rest of the bill says.
Yes, it changed. So it bumped the date from 7/1/29 to 7/1/30 for the December 1 letter. Bumped the date from 7/1/28 to 7/1/2030 for the foundation formula and other tax changes. And then there were amendments to the contingencies themselves. So
They had to line up with the new dates. And so this timeline that you guys
Yes.
have is really the place to look at all that. Because, yeah, that's a lot easier than trying to hold it. They have colors too, that's even better.
Those are Kirby's colors.
Thank you, Kirby. I like your colors.
would you like me to go into any more detail about this instance of amendment?
So I think the concept
Okay,
makes sense for dates.
happy to answer questions at any point.
Okay,
Sixth instance of amendment is to the pre-K language that was in the underlying bill, section 21. The general concept that you're going to get a report back related to pre-kindergarten funding remains the same, but Ways and Means did make several changes here. So it keeps some intent language the same, but it requires AOE, I'm on page 4 of the section by section summary. It requires AOE, DCF, and Building Bright Futures to establish a system to jointly monitor and evaluate pre-K programs. It requires Building Bright Futures to report annually to the General Assembly in consultation with AOE and DCF. It requires Building Bright Futures to submit a report to the General Assembly on or before December 1st, 2026, with information related to Building Bright Futures work under the Federal Preschool Development Grant and data collection. Their initial findings under that grant, outstanding gaps in data they've identified, and any legislative recommendations, all related to pre-K funding. And it also requires JFO to hire a contractor to conduct an updated cost of care analysis to account for pre-K within VT's education system. This concept traveled in the House Education version as introduced, but Ways and Means changed the actual words on the page a little bit with more specificity as to what the JFO report would be coming back to you all with related to how to account for pre-K within the education finance system, and also with recommendations for different funding mechanisms to use to distribute costs for funds for education costs, including all of the various different options. That's coming back to you on or before December 15th of this year. And there is a $75,000 appropriation that is not attached to the Act 73.
Right, and it's not in the budget, but we have money on the bottom line in the budget to take care of this so far. Well, the Senate, I think, knows about this too. Wait, and then.
My question may be more for Emily. I mean, pre-K stuck on this thing, we're dealing with a huge problem. Feels like to me that pre-K is stuck on like a, pin the tail on the donkey kind of thing. Just wondering.
A little bit casually about this. I think the staff was coming back that I've had some temper tantrums about the fact that we can't solve this problem this year. We don't have the data we need to make the decisions we need to make still, even though we have studied this at length. It's not anyone in this room's fault. We still don't know how many hours children are where they are, and CCFAP is calculated as sort of by the hour, and pre-K is by the another block of time. And we've been asking the Agency of Education to tell us how long a school day is, but they only have instructional hours and a number of hours in the classroom. Anyway, it's like we need this study in order to figure it out next year, and I'm so committed to figuring this out next year because we have been kicking the can for quite a few years.
But so I think there's another question that I think I'm hearing from Wayne, which is, why is pre-K part of K-12 education?
Oh, is that your question?
Yeah, why is?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
This is
But
like,
that's also good for us to know.
Yeah, so I didn't need to tell you about my number So Act 66, which passed before I joined the legislature, created a mandatory obligation to pay for 10 hours a week of pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds by school districts. And so school districts do that now out of the education fund in various ways that are quite inconsistent from district to district because of what is available from district to district. And as we move, that is, and then we weight each of those students in a manner that is not as scientifically derived as could be. And so we have had various sort of rounds of trying to get our hands around this. And as we move to a foundation formula, it's going to be even more important to really get entirely clear on what those 10 hours means consistently around the state. And that is what we're going to do next year once we have this information.
so you're telling me that what this does is gives you information that you're going to need to work on your foundation formula with.
To decide if pre-K should be included in the foundation formula, or if it should be a categorical grant separately, or if it should be entirely funded by CCFAP or whatever. But the way that we have the law set up right now won't work at all, and it needs to be fixed before the foundation formula is implemented with regards to pre-K.
Where I was going is, why isn't that a separate bill? Why is it tacked onto this? Because this seems like we're dealing with a huge problem here.
Because it's necessary for the foundation formula, and like about a third of our language is changes we need to make to have a foundation formula.
Thank you. That answered my questions too about it, so that was helpful. Okay, Beth, continue.
Seventh instance of amendment is adding a brand new section to H 955, which amends the pre-kindergarten statute itself, which is 16 VSA 829, by adding a new subdivision to the tuition subsection in the statute, which requires a district of residence to report annually to AOE on the number of hours of pre-K education received by each pre-K child for whom it has provided pre-K education, or on whose behalf it is paid tuition pursuant to this section. And it adds Building Bright Futures to the to subdivision E1, which is the rules subsection, to require Building Bright Futures to work with AOE and DCF to establish a system to monitor pre-K programs. Now we're in the eighth instance of amendment, which is the instance with sections 22 through 86, which were all added by Ways and Means. So section 22 amends section 16 VSA 4010 subsection C, which is your weighting statute. And it requires school districts to require each resident student in grades pre-K through 12 on whose behalf the district pays tuition to complete a form or forms developed by AOE to obtain the info needed for AOE to compute the weighting categories for tuition students. And it requires the form to be included with any residency verification forms or requests for public tuition funding forms required by a school district.
Yes, Marty.
So is this for the current weighting system or the foundation formula weighting system?
Current weighting system, and then it would travel to the foundation formula as well.
Isn't our basis for the weights and the foundation formula very different than our basis for weights right now?
Emily?
So what weights means under current law is very different from what a weight would mean under future law. But no matter how many dollars or tax benefits or tax capacity is attached to it, we still need to actually count the children, right? And right now, there are certain children who are tuitioned over the border into New York or into New Hampshire. These were maybe students who are tuitioned into independent schools that aren't part of the school meals program. None of those students are actually being counted properly. And it's frankly, to some degree, loophole when we passed 127, we said they may collect the information, we should say they shall collect the information. And so we want to make sure that under the foundation formula, when it's even to some degree more important, that we count the children right, that we just count the children.
So this is more counting them.
All this does is count them.
Wait.
Yeah, so they talk about slots, like in daycare, we got so many slots, but we don't actually know how many people are in those slots on a day-to-day basis, or what the total number of slots are filled during the course of a year.
So my understanding is that the technical term for this, Nick, is butts and seats. Butts in seats.
Say it again.
Butts in seats.
But is what?
Butts in seats.
So like-
I think, yeah.
Butts in seats.
Butts in the seat.
You just wanted to make him say it a lot. The children are sitting in seats.
Exactly.
So it's not slots, it's actual children in the class.
I like that.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
we got-
I did not invent it, I don't know who says it, but it is the sort of the term of art.
It would be nice if we were actually paying for the kids in the seats, not just a seat.
Yeah, right, I don't think we're paying for seats, I think we're paying for children in seats.
Okay, let's continue.
Section 23 is the special education funding safeguards and legislative intent section. The vast majority of this section is legislative intent made with the purpose of making sure that any spelling out your legislative intent that any changes to the finance system for education also comply with federal maintenance of efforts related to special education funding. Again, in the interest of time, I think I'm gonna leave it at that unless anyone
That's
thinks.
probably all we need.
Okay, section 24, I'm on page 6 now. Is an amendment to section 828, which is the tuition statute. This is the statute that tells school districts who they're allowed to pay tuition to. And the amendment made in section 24 would prohibit a school that is eligible to receive tuition from requiring tuition or fees of any kind from a student attending the school on public tuition above the amount a school district pays in tuition pursuant to section 823. This language will not take effect until the foundation formula takes effect. So the tuition paid pursuant to section 823 is the base amount plus weights for each student. So you can it's prohibiting a school that is eligible to receive tuition from charging families more than what the child would bring with them from the school district. It also prohibits public receiving. So that piece would apply to any school that is eligible to receive tuition. So that's public and private. And then the section further clarifies that public receiving schools are prohibited from requiring tuition or fees of any kind from above the amount a school district pays in tuition for both resident students and tuition students. So if you can't charge a fee to your tuition students, you also can't charge a fee to your resident students.
Or you could charge a fee to both.
No, you cannot charge
Any fee to either. Okay, it's not either, it's not one or both. Got it.
Section 24A is just intent language that explicitly states that the topping off prohibition that we just talked about in section 24 only takes effect at the same time as the foundation formula, provided that the contingencies have been met. Section 25 is an amendment to 16 VSA section 707, which is part of chapter 11, the Union School District Formation and Governance chapter in Title 16, that amends the amount of a study committee's budget that requires voter approval. So under current law, if a study committee's budget is $50,000 or more, all of the school districts participating in that study committee have to get voter approval for that budget. Ways and Means has raised that amount to $500,000. So if the budget is under $500,000, it would not require voter approval.
Please.
So the reason we did this is not because we think they'll spend 500,000, but we think at 50,000, that actually could be the vote, that could be the cost of a vote. I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago, we were sort of paying for individual school board elections because of the state campaign. And so we don't want them to spend more money voting than they would actually be raised, than they would actually need to raise. It would still need to fit within their existing budgets as warned and voted. It would just be how much they would be sort of shifting from one spot in their budget line items to another spot in their budget line items. We had lots of conversations. Frankly, Representative, I think Odie and Representative Higley went off to try to find some middle ground between the two numbers and came back and decided that 500,000 was fine. But we do not want anyone to spend that much money. We just wanted it to be about 40 was way too low to require a vote.
Thank you for clarifying.
Section 26 requires the State Board of Education to update its education quality standards rule series to establish criteria for identifying schools small by necessity or sparse by necessity on or before March 31st, 2027, unless LCAR gives them an extension. And those rule updates are required to be consistent with the work of the Small Sparse School Committee of the State Board of Education and their recommendations dated December 17th, 2025, which is what they have given to the General Assembly this year based on their work.
So if we want to find that, we can go.
I can certainly send it.
Yeah, just be curious to find.
Section 27 requires the State Board of Education to adopt updates to the district quality standards rule series. to establish criteria for intra-district budgeting. And they have to establish those updates on or before March 31st, 2027, unless LCAR gives them an extension. And those rules shall ensure resources are allocated across schools within each district in a way that provides substantially equal educational opportunities and enables students to achieve or exceed education quality standards.
I was gonna have some power here, Trevor.
Section 27A amends section 7 from Act 183, which was the yield bill from 2024, to require AOE. So section 7 and Act 183 of 2024 require the Agency of Education to update the district quality standards to include recommended reserve fund account standards. My understanding is that hasn't happened yet. And so this language is requiring AOE in collaboration with some new folks, VASBO, the Vermont Superintendents Association, and the Vermont School Boards Association to complete those rulemaking updates.
VASBO is the business officers.
Yes.
I learned that today.
And there should be an A, it should be VASBO.
Yeah.
Only human. 27B, school transportation grants. This requires a report back to you all with a whole bunch of information related to transportation that's happening either within school districts or around school, or basically education related transportation. So a report back on or before December 1st of this year with information regarding what grades each school district provides transportation for, whether a school district owns or leases their vehicles, whether public transport is used and the costs associated with public transport for school purposes, the methods by which students get to and leave school. So is it school district providing transportation? Is it public transportation? Is there a receiving school sending transportation to get those students? And what are the costs associated with that? Are mom and dad driving kiddos, or parental or grown-ups driving kiddos? And what's the aggregate costs associated with all of that? Information on bus driver pay and benefits and aggregate education transportation costs. Then, after AOE has given you all that information, they're required to make recommendations for the following: geographic radius around a school within which transportation is not required, definitions for distance students and safe walking routes, how CSAs may fit into education transportation, how co-curricular and after-school travel could be included in a district's transportation services, funding recs for the new finance system, legislative updates to the transportation reimbursement statute, and how to ensure students attending CTE centers other than their assigned center have access to transportation to the same extent as if they were attending their assigned CTE center.
Got a question, but not on that. Criteria for intra-district budgeting. Give me an example of what you have in mind there.
Yeah, so under the foundation formula, a school district is going to get an education opportunity payment, right? Which is, and then there's going to be other categorical aid and other pieces of funding coming to them. And so intra-district budgeting would be recommendations on how school districts should allocate that lump sum across the needs of the entire district.
Oh, Lynn.
Yeah. There's a requirement in here for bus driver pay and benefits. There was a time when the school districts hired their own bus drivers, bought their own buses, and they were part of the support staff, whether they were in a contract or not. But how would a school district or school districts know if they've contracted out with Mountain Transit or, Bell Transport, whatever the local transportation, they get a set amount, they take care of it. They do the games, they do the transportation for them.
Go ahead.
The idea is we wanted, some school districts still do exactly what you described with owning our buses and having your staff, so we wanted to make sure that we were making space and room for that scenario with this language, and then we were also making space for the contracts scenario in this language. Because there's so many different ways of doing it, the list is way too long. And we wanted to, because there's such an incredible diversity of how school transportation works in the state, we wanted to make sure that we were hitting on every single instance.
Okay.
Great.
Section 27C, student profile form. That form that we talked about a couple sections up about weighting categories for tuition students, this is asking AOE to develop that form in consultation with school business officials. Section 27D, another piece of rulemaking, requires the State Board of Education to adopt updates to the length of school day rules. There is an entire rule series, it's not very long, but it is a separate rule series related to the length of school day. So this asks the State Board of Education to update those rules to establish criteria for the length of a school day for each grade, pre-K through 12. Right now, pre-K is not represented in those rules. That is consistent with the definition of school that we're going to walk through in a minute.
Deborah's question.
Yeah, in sections 26, 27, you have date certain for rulemaking, and I don't see one here.
Oh, that may be something that was overlooked.
That's the man from Elkhart.
We have two Elkhart members on our committee and they
I know.
that's so thank you so much.
Share that. So is that in the actual language or in this section?
Oh, I don't know. I'm just asking the question.
I am going to make an assumption. I drafted this section by section looking at the language. So I'm going to make an assumption that it's not in the language if I didn't include it in the section by section. But I can certainly connect with Chair Kornheiser.
Yeah, because you may have.
Yeah, we're probably gonna have another technical amendment.
So you can add this to your technical amendment. We do not need to do the amendment from here. Thank you.
Section 28 is a repeal of section 37 from Act 73, which was the section that established or created section 4019 in Title 16, which is the small schools, sparse schools support grants. And the reason it is being repealed here is because that section under Act 73 does not take effect until the foundation formula takes effect. But we want to make changes to that language now. And so there's no easy way to do that other than repealing what you did last year and reenacting it this year with the new language we want to add. This is a concept, if you all continue to follow education reform, this is a drafting concept you are going to see repeatedly over the next several years, where we are having to repeal language that has not gone into effect because you want to make changes to it before it goes into effect.
So that's the cleanest way to do it.
That is the cleanest way to do it,
Yes.
both for my office when we go in and make sure the green books are accurate, for anyone who's following along legislatively and trying to piece together the history, and also so that we're not making any mistakes. We're not leaving pieces here and there. My office is in discussions on if there's any easier way to do it, and there really isn't. So this is
Imagine the kind of thing you'd end up with if you did it some other way.
right,
It wouldn't be pretty.
right.
Okay.
So that's the only reason that repeal is there, so that in section 29, you can take what you enacted in Act 73, plop it right into section 29 and make some very small changes. And those are current language in Act 73 requires the State Board of Education to make the determination for whether a school is small or sparse and therefore entitled to the grant. This is changing it to AOE making that determination.
Oh, okay.
It also adds some clarifying language to make clear that these grants only apply to public schools operated by a school district. So occasionally we've inserted the word public in front of school or the term operated by a school district to make that clear. And then I've put that little asterisk there. Since this section of law had not taken effect yet, we needed to repeal it totally and then just reenact it to make changes. And then this new section 29 would not take effect until July 1, 2023 if the contingencies were met, same as the foundation formula. And then the last section that I am responsible for in this amendment as it stands now, section 29A is amending section 16 VSA section 11, which is the master definitions statute for all of Title 16. It is a very long list. We're in the 40s of terms. And so we're adding definitions for these terms to the very end of that statute. And I have not I have not spelled out what those definitions are. I've just highlighted what the terms are. And those would take effect now. Those would take effect July 1, 2026.
Those are all best sections. Marty?
Can we go back briefly to section 24, the one about non-additional payments to either receiving or sending schools beyond tuition? 24, yes. It talks about the tuition first it went to 823, and you said that's the base amount. Do we need the base in the foundation formula, or do we need the weighted amount?
So section 823, the reference to section 823 is a reference to the tuition statute. And the tuition statute spells out how you calculate tuition. And under the foundation formula, tuition is calculated by the base and the weights applicable to each student.
What about a circumstance in which a school decides they're going to have some special kind of a field trip and it's not part of their budget? And they want all students to attend. They either can pay, according to this, they could not charge students an additional amount in order to participate in this program. Could those students have a fundraiser and raise the amount in order to do that? Or could a parents group raise the funds in order for that to happen?
Let's look at the language specifically rather than the summary to see what's in there.
What page when
I can I'll share my screen. It's page 15, line 5. Sharing my screen. So it prohibits such schools from requiring tuition or fees of any kind above the money they're bringing with them from the district. It's silent as to, I would read requiring as, it doesn't matter what the source of the funds are. You can't require students to come up with that money, regardless of whether it would be out of pocket or fundraising. That's how I read that.
So that would eliminate a school attempting to do something that they had not already budgeted for, that wasn't already accounted for.
I can't,
Their tuition money coming in.
I can't speak to how this would be executed in the field.
I've received a lot of comments from people saying that that would impede certain extracurricular activities that students participate in and pay a fee for.
So I'm gonna have Emily answer and then Lynn, if that is the issue.
I think there's a difference between the private fundraising that goes towards the school budget and the school requiring a fee of students. So if there's a field trip that is imagined that all of the students are getting together to fundraise for the field trip, even if it's like a trip to France, none of that is requiring a fee of those children or those families. But I think where it would be requiring a fee is if, say, one youth was not able to participate in the fundraiser because of whatever else was going on in their life, and then that kid was either not able to go on the field trip or their parents had to come up with the difference they would have raised in the fundraiser, right? And so for me, that's the difference between a fee that's being charged and the ability for folks to privately fundraise and give that to the school. One is what the school is requiring of the people outside of the building, and the other is what people outside the building are offering the school.
I think there are certain sports programs in public schools that I'm aware of that charge a fee for the students to be able to participate.
Some districts do that and some districts don't, and that is what we are trying to get at here is we are providing consistent funding from district to district to meet students' needs, then taxpayers are having consistent, remember, we're gonna have one homestead rate all over the state. So taxpayers have consistent taxes from district to district. Then why will some families have to pay more for their students when they're paying the exact same taxes as the town next door? Because that, to some degree, is, like that's.
I understand that, but.
So that's the idea.
That's what happens. And so,
And I think in current practice, we have different tax rates from district to district. And so some districts make up the difference in funding through, say, charging fees for families, and some districts cover those costs through taxes. But if all districts are already paying the same taxes, then why would it be sort of fair for some communities to be charging fees and others not?
so a school district would have to figure out how to include those athletic fees within their base budget.
Which is more equal access for students, right? Because if you're charged $1,000 to play in the football team for the uniforms, and you can afford that for your kids, but I can't. My kid can't play unless I hold a bake sale or something, so it's unequal access. I mean, that's how I'm interpreting this.
It will be very difficult to figure out how to.
Hopefully the foundation formula is gonna be
Generous enough to.
more to cover this sort of things, that's why. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a situation, there's always a couple of these situations. We had a situation where Skills USA, which is part of the CTE program, and the students compete. And they do it at the end of the year. And then they would come to us in May. And there were like 12 of them that could go to the national meeting and compete in St. Louis or someplace, and a couple of faculty. It was, it got to be sort of a bone of contention because they wanted the school to pay, or they had to go out and fundraise among the community or some such thing. And it was like, if this happens every year, why isn't this in our budget? I mean, there's a theory in funding, but everything should be in the budget. And you shouldn't be doing this extra fundraising. It's just, if it's there, you need it, you put it in. And when schools go from like a little fundraising here and a little that becomes a big deal, especially if the budgets get down to the fee. The other thing that you have is that, again, athletics, jackets for the hockey team, the Skills US, you name it. They hit up every business in town every other week, all the time.
Yeah.
And it's extremely aggravating. But, they won the state championship and they go to London to go to run or something in a race or something. So there is value to having it all in the budget up front right away. Or not. And if it's not there, they can give car washes or something, or, they sell grapefruit. And that's another one that teams do, is they sell something. The point of it is that there is a theory, there is a point of view on this that is in conflict with the schools.
Right, okay, so I think we understand, whether we like it or not, I think we understand it. Yes? Okay. Thank you, Beth.
Okay.
And now, John and Beth, I know you all have to go to House Ed, right? For the next round, you'll be saying this in your sleep for months. Julia, who's been so patiently waiting, who I thought might be first and is now going to be the last one.
Yeah, that comes up.
I'm happy for all the questions, and this will be fast.
Way to see your support team leave.
Yeah.
What's going on, Ray?
Good afternoon.
Oh, Julia, thank you for coming.
Absolutely. Julia Richter, Joint Fiscal Office. I know that you've done a lot of talking about H955, so I can go through it in whatever level of detail is helpful. There is the fiscal note that's on the committee page under my name. And while everybody has left of the staff team, I do need to note that this really was a joint effort. And that while I'm presenting it, Ezra did a ton of work, as did others in the office.
It's great. I know it's a good thing you all work together well, so we appreciate that.
So do you want me to go ahead and share my screen
Oh, sure.
for the fiscal note?
Yeah, and I think there'll be places where you can say, the impact is in the future and we don't know what it is or whatever.
13 pages, right?
Something like that. Yeah, it's pretty long.
15 pages.
Act 73 was longer of a fiscal note. So Chair Kornheiser did speak to this a little bit in the very beginning, but as you'll note in the fiscal note, the vast bulk of this bill takes place in fiscal years beyond 2027. A lot of it is contingent on a number of things happening. So the overall fiscal impact of this bill is unclear, as impacts depend on outstanding policy decisions at both the state and local level. We do have in our section by section sort of where there are potential fiscal implications of each section. And I also do want to talk about this first paragraph under fiscal impact, which relates to the appropriations in the bill. So as Beth walked through, there are a few places in the Ways and Means Amendment that would change the uses of the Act 73 appropriations that were then amended in section C-103 of the budget. So you'll recall section C-103 changed that education transformation appropriation. So pulling some of it back from the agency and dedicating it for the education transformation work. So this bill really adjusts the uses of that appropriation, and it includes one FY27 appropriation from the general fund to JFO for that pre-K study. And this is covered by that about 130,000 that you had on the bottom line as the big bill passed here.
And presumably somebody has let Senate Appropriations know that they don't have all that money to play with.
If they decide to fund they haven't seen the ed transformation bill yet, but yes, our budget team colleagues working in the Senate are very aware of this. So do you want me to just go through?
Let's just do the quick reminder of your nice table, because that's stuff that's actually in C-103. I think we really want to know what the appropriations are for the most part.
Yeah, absolutely. So this first chunk of the table, this is where the uses of section C-103 have been changed. So this is reflecting how the uses have been refined. Section C-103, we can pull up the language if that's helpful, was quite broad, just dedicated over 1.042 million for this education transformation work. And so now H95 is saying of that section C-103, here's how we are going to amend those uses. So section 4 of H955, this is the CISA grant program. So this would amend actually 2 prior appropriations. So this would be funding for issuing grants to CISAs to assist with startup costs. And this would be funded by 2 existing appropriations and amending those uses. One is 30,000 that was previously appropriated to AOE. This is that section C-103. And then the other is there was in FY25, there was an appropriation to AOE for BOCES, startup support grants. I forget the exact name of it. This bill changes the name of BOCES to CISAs, but they're still the same. And so this is saying of that ed fund appropriation that was made, there's still 60,000 left of it. And so it will be dedicated for funding these grants. So that's section 4. Section 17, this includes the remainder of those amended uses of section C-103. So first is directing 210,000 to be funding to reimburse union school district study committees for incurred expenses. You'll recall these are those study committees that are meeting to recommend any proposed mergers. The next piece of section 17, this is amending those uses for 442,000 to be used for the study committee facilitators and administrative costs. So there will be 8 facilitators for the study committees. So this is funding for hiring those 8 facilitators. And then also there is one BOCES, now called CISA, existing in Vermont, called the Vermont Learning Collaborative, abbreviated as VTLC. And so because they're already up and running and they're going to be supporting with a lot of this work of getting these other CISAs up and running, they can keep up to 32,000 for incurred administrative costs associated with this section or with this work. And lastly, also amending those uses in section C103 is directing 300,000 for funding to issue grants to assist with hiring CISA executive directors. So you'll recall that each CISA will have an executive director position.
So if you want to look at our budget as introduced, section C103 starts on page 104 of H951. So if you want to actually see the language of what we had in there, which was much more general.
Yeah, so I have it pulled up here.
There you go.
We're really looking at this piece that 1.4525
right.
Amendment. You can see of awarding transition grants to school districts and CISAs to support the work required to transition. So this is that piece that we're saying, okay, it's very broad in the big bill because it hadn't been all sorted out yet. Now 955 is taking that and saying, here's how it's actually going to be used.
So the CISA that we have, I don't know if it's the right time to ask the question, but joint fiscal, you find that did incur the cost saving? And did it add to the bureaucracy?
So we can't speak to that. I did hear the question this morning in the caucus of the whole. I will say that it's really hard to analyze cost savings in our current financing system because all of these decisions are made at the local level and where efficiencies may be gained. There's then the question, okay, are we going to put that money back into the budget and dedicate it to something else? Or are we going to cut our budget? So I would defer to your colleagues on House Education who have heard a lot more testimony.
There was a presentation that the Vermont Learning Collaborative did to House Education, and they gave some examples. I looked up the presentation. I don't know if we have it on our, but they gave examples of where they actually saved money. And then, as Julia said, the question is, as a school district, you can choose to reinvest that into your trip to Montreal or your football team, or hiring another teacher for English language learning, or you can choose to say, we're going to reduce our budget and cut taxes.
Right, so there's two things. One is if they hired additional staff in order to make it work, and then of course you get all the ancillary costs that go along with more staff. And then if they netted a reduction so that you had extra money, did they spend it? And then the next question would be, should we say you can't spend it?
Well, that's a whole different, because what's going to happen is under the foundation formula, you're going to get what they get. So go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. The foundation formula creates consistent funding throughout the state. And so any funding from CISA, any savings from CISA would help sort of make that foundation formula work for districts.
So it's going to just roll into the transition, what's coming out of your transition.
It's one of the main transition mechanisms we have, really.
And there's not a big, huge bureaucracy because there's not a lot of people running in the CISA. I mean, the Vermont Learning Collaborative, how many people are involved in that, Emily? Do you?
I don't know, not very many.
Okay, yeah.
Quick.
Yeah, Dave.
How many executive directors are there? There's 7.
6.
Pieces and so are they part-time, obviously? Is that 300,000 for 6 people?
Let me check.
You're not paid much then.
It's 6,000.
Right.
306.
And I think I would say that, yeah, so that would be to 6, 50,000 and awarded to AOE to 6 of the CISAs outlined in this bill. And then it's a question back to, Rep. LaRoche's point of, the fiscal impact of the CISAs. This is what we have here, the bottom of section 2, getting to why the fiscal impact is unclear. What those executive directors are paid, if additional staff is hired, if there's other costs incurred, of course, that would be additional expenditures by the CISAs. And we also don't know how that would be offset, or if it would be offset with savings.
So has anybody looked at whether or not the existing administration of a district or whatever it is can't already do the tasks that the CISAs would be doing?
I have not looked at that.
The idea is that, I mean, right now districts are doing all the things the CISAs do, and the idea is the CISAs would do it more efficiently and effectively than districts can do it on their own. The districts will not be doing those things anymore.
Which would reduce staff at the district level.
Yes.
Because right now we have how many business managers or how many whatever.
Yeah.
And so if you have a CISA that's overseeing all of that and you need one of them, you don't need 8 of them or 12 of them or whatever of
It
them.
would be nice if I went on my way home on Friday and happened to stop at the local store and was immediately accosted by someone that is a paraeducator down in the high school in our area. And just started discussing this. She said, you need to go into the school. You want to see you need to see what's going on. That sounds good. But anyhow, so eventually she talked about the back end of the house, the administration part. She said, we used to have 5. We got about 30 of them in there now.
So this is an opportunity for reducing administrative costs.
I'm not sure we're going to get to it this way, but I agree with you. It needs to be taken care of.
Okay. Mark,
I would just point out something from appropriations point of view. We appropriated 1.45 to 500,000. And with these changes, there is still a balance of 470,500 that be part of that original appropriations AOE to further transitional.
Madam Chair.
yes, go ahead.
There are tasks we asked the Agency of Education to do that were attached to that original appropriation that we do still want them to do. And so we don't have to name them in this bill because we haven't changed them.
Well, there's the positions. There was already appropriated and another 150,000 for contracted services.
There are some of the contracts that you're already going to go forward on are things that we still want to do. And they were contracts that were requested in Act 73 and that are still going forward. And we just don't need to make changes in, so we're not mentioning here.
You don't have to mention them again.
Does that mean that they've been spent or they've been accounted for?
We have some has been spent and some is accounted for. And I think Emily Berger has,
This is some of what we tried to get AOE to come and talk to us about during the budget.
Right, but in our budget, we're saying there's 1.452 available.
But it's specifically for these.
Right, we're taking 982,000 of that 1.45 right here that we're highlighting. To me, meant that there's still $500,000 left.
Oh,
in this part,
right, that the AOE is going to be using.
Yes.
Yes.
It hasn't been delineated.
No, because they did not delineate, right.
Yeah, so I think to that point, the adjustment of uses in H 955 is less than the appropriation that was amended in section C 103. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Dave, did you have a question?
No, I'm still figuring it's part-time executive director. in 6 regions and, you know, my area is from Belvedere all the way down to Stockbridge and part-time person would be, be busy, but okay. Trying to see if it's realistic. Yep, thank you.
This was determined, these dollar figures were determined in Ways and Means or in house education?
Education.
A great deal of time taking customer.
Yeah, and so I think they feel confident with that.
I'll ask them. Thank you. Yeah.
I will add, I don't think they, it's not imagined that this would be the sum, the full amount that a CISO would spend. It's that this is sort of a seed money, and then districts are,
Gonna come up with the
they would
money.
raise more money in the fee for or education mix.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's the table about the amended uses or the proposed amended uses. And then the other piece, the only new appropriation in H 955 is that 75,000 for the pre-K contractor.
Which we talked about.
So I don't know that you need to go through all of this wonderful fiscal. I'm just trying to think about what we need to know. We've talked about the grant startup program and senior chart. A lot of these things are sort of in the chart. The language changes we heard about from Beth Friday or today. Committee, just stop if you're thinking you need questions about some of this. Mike.
I have a question. I want to make sure I actually understood the legacy debt aid, that was section 74,
Yep.
61 million, which I think we heard would come from the ed fund. So the legacy debt is currently in school budgets being
Yes.
paid out of education spending. So this isn't an increased amount. This is a shift to how that money's being spent.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct. So so section 74, the legacy debt aid program, that 61 million is the best estimate of the maximum in a single year, the maximum total amount of the legacy debt aid. The funding source is outstanding in H 955. That said, to your point, your understanding is accurate that under current law, we know that a district's education spending includes all of its debt service, so interest and bond. So this would not, if the policy decision is made that this is funded out of the education fund, then this would not increase the overall cost to the education fund. However, it would be a shift of where that cost is carried. That said, it's a shift in a new system where everything is shifting. So we really can't compare it to current state.
Okay, thank you.
Wayne.
So the total outstanding legacy debt for our entire school system, and I'm assuming that means capital construction and everything, 61 million.
In 1 year.
It's not the total outstanding,
So we
it's
got
the
20 years.
payments.
We got 20 years bonded. I understand, yeah, exactly.
And it's not going to be 61 million and then just drop off in a single year, right? It's going to phase out over time. I think first phase up a little bit and then phase down.
And there may be some higher years because that capital graph, there were years way back when it was 50, 60 million. But along the way, there were in between now and the furthest 20-year out, there was some close to 100 million months in there. So the amounts paid in some years is going to be closer to 100 million, right?
So not, perhaps you're referencing the treasurer's presentation. This is specific to the total debt that exists by school districts that was incurred prior to December 31, 2025. So it has a time constraint. And it's basically saying of all of the debt that was incurred prior to December 31, 2025, in one single year, what is the total maximum possible debt service, interest and principal? And that would be 61.
And this is all the bonded dollars. Is there cash someplace to handle it?
So, and it's not necessarily 61 next year, it's as Julia said, 61 is the max. As it's it's gonna ramp up and then go back down again. This is the total amount of bonded debt that Michael Gahn from the bond bank put together for us, and the total bond payments. There are a bunch of presentations from him on our committee page.
So in any given year, this is the most, it can be less.
Yeah, this is anticipated to be the most of all of the debt that's been taken on, and there is and no more debt would be taken on under this language because there is that date in there.
Lynn?
What about, I think it's Woodstock, that did this maybe at town meeting? That's.
They had a vote. It was contingent.
Contingent,
So Woodstock is not included.
no, it would be on its own separate.
Their future debt, this is old debt.
This is debt that established as of last December.
Yeah.
It's already gone by. Anything new is
So
new
what
ballgame.
happens to that? Does that get
They
put?
haven't, that particular vote is that they wouldn't actually bond until we create a school construction program. They would also.
So they would be covered under this whole big umbrella that we're creating here.
In the way future, maybe if their particular project actually fits within the guidelines of the school construction.
Okay,
The bond vote was contingent on their end on a whole lot of other things. And then there's the whole is contingent on whether they even get a school construction.
But it has nothing to do with this number.
except that, no, I understand it doesn't in the, but I'm thinking in terms of my understanding, where the news reported it, is that they were trying to get it under the umbrella before, but they didn't make it. It will not
They
be,
didn't even come close to me.
okay, so they're gonna be included in this,
Because they haven't
whatever news
actually-
came we have.
They haven't
Because they
done
haven't
it.
actually taken on that debt yet. They
Yes.
just voted to authorize it in the future if a bunch of other stuff happens that has not happened.
Okay, so I also want to clarify. If you had December 25th, 2025 debt, that would have all been paid by everybody in the state anyway, under the normal circumstances of the way the ed fund pays. And so this would be the same continuation of what it had. It doesn't change the ed fund responsibilities.
I would say it doesn't change, assuming this is paid out of the education fund, it wouldn't change the ed fund responsibilities. The shift would be that under current law, yes, school debt is covered by all property taxpayers in the state. However, because our homestead property tax rates are based in part on the local per pupil spending of the district.
Right.
The local district will have a proportionally higher homestead rate, in addition to everybody's rates also being a bit higher to cover the debt. So it will be a shift at the local level in terms of the tax mechanisms. However, this would happen at the same time as the foundation formula, which is doing away entirely with those locally adjusted rates.
Right. Okay, so it's part of the local budget now,
Correct.
and then the money gets sent back and covers whatever it's going to cover.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I'm just trying to go through this, and I'm, a lot of this is not gonna apply so much.
Yeah, we can go through this quickly.
I don't know if there's anything.
I do want to know, do you want me to just sort of go through and hit a few of
I'll
them?
hit a few, because we do not need to do every one of these by any stretch. I was sort of skipping over, we're into the 20s now, but.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
One piece I would flag is the study committees, if expenses above the reimbursement grants exceed the reimbursement grants, then that would be covered by the member districts, which would then fall into school budgets.
Yeah.
Thus impacting property taxes, all else equal. We talked about the appropriation changes, talked about the contingencies, financing, data collection. A few of these data collection pieces, if it results in better data being collected, then it means that there are students who have not been counted under current law that should have been counted. Which then would mean in the foundation formula, those districts where those students should have been counted and weren't being counted would receive more funds for those students. Special education funding, this is really language to be in compliance with federal maintenance of effort. You talked a lot about the tuition prohibition, fee prohibition, you talked about budget approval, rulemaking, you talked about all of this rulemaking. The rulemaking really will have a fiscal impact, of course, because it will impact how those dollars are distributed. However, we don't know what the rules will say, so we don't know the fiscal impact. Regional assessment districts, big picture, if the changes increase the frequency of reappraisals, then additional costs may occur. There's also that piece in section 35 that would result in an increased cost to the state where the cost of the cost of the full reappraisal will be covered by the tax department. This would happen over multiple years. It would be spread over at least 6 years. The director of PVR will be identifying a schedule for doing so. And this won't kick in really until those regional assessment districts are up and running in, I think, like 2030. However, in FY 27, there were 280 parcels that would have been used to calculate this cost, and you'll remember
140,280.
Yeah, sorry, I'm tired of
The day, I get it.
And the way that payment is determined is it's a lesser of. So the Commissioner of Taxes estimates the full cost of that payment, that full cost of that reappraisal. And if that cost is less than $66 times every parcel, the commissioner pays the lesser of. So that $66 times that total parcels would be 22.5 million. However, that wouldn't be paid in a single year. That would be over multiple years and into the future. So that's like the maximum over 6 years.
Right. So divided by 6, so yeah, okay.
And if these regional assessment districts increase efficiency, there could be savings. Again, we don't know. So it's really the regional assessment districts. Property classifications, of course, outstanding policy decisions here will depend on the impact of the property classifications. I would flag that outstanding the multipliers that are associated with the different tax classifications, how much those homestead pay in relation to non-homestead in relation to the second homes.
Okay.
You want to keep going? I want to back up to something, but if you want to just.
Why don't we finish and then we'll back up and.
I'm just trying to fly through
That's good.
highlights. The school construction, you spoke about this a lot.
Yep.
Depend on outstanding policy and funding decisions. Of course, future impacts would be directly related to the increase in bond indebtedness and market conditions. Also would impact or could impact the calculation of the transfer to the cash fund, but all of that will depend on those outstanding policy decisions. Those positions in the AOE that you spoke about, those are not included in the FY 27. Those budget, and this bill does not put them in the FY 27 budget. It directs AOE to come back with their budget request, identifying funding levels of those positions. A lot about school construction. This is that supplemental district spending piece. This is that piece where it's that amount that a district can vote to spend locally above all of the amount that they're getting from the foundation formula. And there's that equalization mechanism to raise those funds. And school construction is not limited by that 5% cap that exists for other supplemental district spending.
So it wouldn't count, it wouldn't count part of that, okay.
And the impact of the way that the supplemental district spending mechanism is set up, and this was established in Act 73, is there's a recapture mechanism. We don't need to go into great detail, but essentially the school districts that have that supplemental district spending, that supplemental district spending decision will only impact that school district's tax rate in that year. And then any amount that's recaptured by the state from the equalization mechanism will then be used in the following year to lower everybody's property taxes. And then the foundation formula transitions, John walked through this. These are really mostly just timing changes. And then we have another way of thinking about the effective
Did
date.
you put this chart together on the day?
Yes.
Figuring out effective dates, I always.
I will say it was a soothing exercise.
Oh, good, well, that is.
Soothing.
All right, Wayne, you have a question?
Going back to section 23, special education.
Sorry, can you give me a page number?
So this one, yeah,
Okay,
it's on page 6.
okay.
At the top.
And this is probably more from, section 23 would prohibit school districts from reducing staff, programs, or funding which would disproportionately affect students with disabilities. Who decides? Is that an opinion, or is that, some metrics? And my issue is we're spending an awful lot of money on special education, and a lot of it is one-on-one. I have empathy for those kids, but then on the other hand, I also hear that they're disrupting classrooms in some cases. So we're bending over backwards to help them, but in other places, we're saying you can't give any money, extra money to your exemplary students to help them go further. So this is, and it's more of a policy discussion. I know we have to abide by federal law, but then do we have attorneys looking at that federal law to make sure that we know the wiggle room in that law?
So I certainly will defer to Chair Kornheiser on the policy piece, and I'll defer to the lawyers looking at the maintenance of effort. I will say from a technical fiscal perspective, maintenance of effort is important so that the state can draw all of those federal monies down.
But see, I have a problem with drawing down federal money just for the purpose of drawing down federal money if it's not being effectively used to promote the education and welfare of the kids in the state of Vermont. But some people want all the money. We want all the money. And that there, I think in and of itself can be a problem.
So that's a policy choice. And I would say that to the extent that maintenance of effort is not met, if maintenance of effort is not met, then there are also next out year fiscal implications of looking back when there was special education funding that came into the state. If maintenance of effort was not met in that year, then there are sort of ripple effects of the state needing to cover those funds. As for the policy argument, that is so outside of my bailiwick.
Not hers at all.
Of course, the other issue is, if there's less money, then maybe we don't need some of the staff that we've got.
Emily, you want to say something about
I
special
encourage
education?
there's a Vermont Association of Special Education. Something. Would be great to have a conversation with about that. And there's also a special education director, agency of education that can talk to you about maintenance of effort. It's not even just maintenance of effort, it's also maintenance of effort and maintenance of
Fiscal support.
and it's fairly complicated area of federal law though. I would keep other people to talk
We
about.
can point at it some other time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Sounds like that's a whole other project. All right, so, Lynn.
I have a question. I think it's probably for Emily. This is a tax bill as much as it is an education bill. And I guess I'd like to have some justification, maybe is the right word, for why we are going to go and increase taxes on second homes who do not use our schools, who actually help subsidize the property taxes for everybody else, because they pay property taxes right now that are probably substantial. What's the logic behind trying to just, I mean, it almost looks punitive. So what's that for? Because I think they contribute to, I mean, I talked about this before. We have Ken Jones, who was an economist from the Commerce Department.
Yeah.
Who did all that white paper stuff about how much they can determine from Visa. These people come in for a week, and then they come in and they spend a week, and then they go and they stay for a month, and then they buy a condo or a house or something. I mean, you can see that these are the potential future Vermonters. Their children and their families come here. We make more than just the property taxes off it. Are we trying to drive them away? Are we trying to punish them? Are we trying to bleed them dry? Or, I mean, I could go on and on. You get the idea.
Yes, and I know, Representative Phelps is also against very strongly about this. This was a decision we made in Act 73 to set this in motion. And so the bulk of the debate about this happened last year, and this year we've really been working very closely with the tax department to put in place the technical changes to make this happen. One of the major concerns, particularly from the Senate, about moving to a foundation formula is that some districts who have been significantly underfunding schools, Slate Valley and Berry are my two favorite examples, because I have reps from those two districts on committee. Concerned that while everyone agreed, administration included, that those districts needed more resources, and that's why the foundation formula was a great idea. A real concern that bringing those districts' taxes up was unadvisable, right? And so we hit upon this tax type as the best way to keep those districts' homestead taxes as low as they are under current law. The justification for the second homes, I would say the bulk of our tax structure, whether that's our corporate income tax, our personal income tax, or our property tax structure, is really based around very explicitly an ability to pay. That's how the whole tax structure is built. And a second home is by definition owned by someone who has a greater ability to pay because they are holding greater wealth than someone who just has one home. And that's the sort of basic philosophical argument. I absolutely understand that there is lots of space to disagree on that. That's the reasoning.
That's why we increase the property transfer tax for certain homes.
Yeah.
Even though you can, doesn't mean you should. That's the argument.
So this is
It's a philosophical.
it is, and so it's.
And it will have consequences.
And it's a good reminder that this was conversation was what we had in Act 73, and we're not changing that. This is just putting into place the mechanism to make that all happen with the right dates and everything, given the program we
And
have.
I want to take like the 80th chance to just praise and appreciate the tax department and how incredibly collaborative, both technically and philosophically, they've been through this entire process. It's been a real pleasure to work with on this.
Are there any other questions? Is everybody pretty brain dead?
I am, but
Because we're gonna take a break and then we'll come back and vote, but if you have another question, this is the time to ask.
I just wanted to make sure, I'll try to be quick. I wanted to ask the chair a question, because I'm making assumptions in my mind. And I apologize, I back in. The foundation formula, my understanding is, and I want to be educated, but is that can be a cost contained tool. And it is likely to, for want of a better word, shift resources from school districts that spend a lot or more than the average to those that spend less and help equalize things. Is that accurate?
It's partially accurate. So, and there are some assumptions in that I want to unpack a little bit. The foundation formula and the way it's calculated under Act 73 is not designed to be an average. And so I think that's sort of something that's in the zeitgeist, but that's not how it's calculated. That's not how it's designed. It's really how much is needed to meet the educational outcomes that are needed.
Mm-hmm.
We have a whole lot of work to do next year as that foundation formula is recalculated. And as we add these surrounding grants to understand how much we're actually talking about delivering to each district. It will certainly be more for those districts that are significantly underfunded. It is not clear to me if it will be less for districts that are spending a lot, or if it will be maybe a little less or a lot less. We really just don't know yet because there's still a lot to figure out. What I will say is the goal on the tax side, and for me of the foundation formula, is less about reducing spending and more about stabilizing spending so that year over year growth is predictable rather than totally, and year over year taxes are predictable rather than sort of the stochastic situation we've been in up until now. I'm sorry for the ridiculous word. It was the one that came to mind.
No, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Wayne, just following up on that. We have personnel in all the different districts. It's not like we have them all in the state employee system where we have ranks and everybody on, salary ranges. They're all over the place as far as I know. Is that correct? If so, then was there any thinking? Maybe they all should be part of the state system.
Oh, gosh. Yes, lots of people talk about that.
And that might solve some of the predictability problems.
Maybe, but yes, it might. I don't know. It could also mean that there was this leveling up so that every teacher in the state got the salary of the highest paid teacher, right? Like there's a lot of unpredictability in that idea.
They cut my salary years ago.
Salary got done.
Well, that's a problem even when you create these.
Yes,
I mean,
it is one of the concerns about very large districts. Yes.
Yeah, when you have really large districts, that makes sense.
It's also one of the opportunities in really large districts, depending on where you sit on that conversation.
Okay.
what teacher's contract?
I think we've asked all our questions for now. Thank you both for
Thank
hanging
you.
out with us. Committee, I would like us to come back at 4:30 to vote. You good on that?
Can we come back early? I have to leave at 4:30 because there are three of us that have to these school district meeting.
Okay.
We have to, two of us are driving there.
Come back in 10 minutes.
4:20.